The old king put down the letter and said slowly, I, Alfred Graves, hereby declare to all lords of this nation. Assemble your forces, we are going to war. Upon hearing the old king's words, and after recovering from the shock, the guard beside him nodded solemnly. Even though the old king had managed to unify the entire continent, most city-states had yet to recover from the previous Great War. As such, the guard's surprise was to be expected. However, after giving it some more thought, the guard soon understood. The shrewd old king was truly above the common rank and file like the guard. Even without external factors slowing down the nation's recovery, it would still take over decades for the continent to return to its former glory prior to the Great War of the past. By then, would the old king still be alive? Even if Lil Tess were to inherit the throne and succeed the old king as the queen of the continent, would her father, who would then be in the heavens, rest easy? No, of course not. So long as the danger capable of wiping out the heroes remained, the old king could not rest, even in death. Therefore, the ensuing battle against the unknown dragon would not only serve to resolve the crisis plaguing Longsong Alley, the copper mine of the nation, it would also serve to hasten the nation's recovery to its former glory. The body of a dragon was like a giant treasure trove, after all. As long as they could defeat the ancient dragon that rivaled Agatha in strength, the rewards they would reap would be astronomical. Moreover, should the humans manage to defeat an ancient dragon by banding together, the dragon race's opinion towards the human race would likely increase. Hopefully, it would cause dragons to think twice before sieging any of the human settlements. Additionally, as a show of respect to the old king, little Tess would likely gain the unanimous support of the lords of the nation to succeed her father as the ruler of the nation. The guard could not help but be extremely excited upon this line of thought. He was happy that he had managed to grasp the old king's thought process, even if it was only slightly. He hurriedly ran out of the door with the intention of informing the ministers and the lords of the king's decision. In less than 3 days, the old king, Alfred Graves' decision to launch a crusade against an unknown dragon in the north had spread throughout the nation. As expected, the country had gone into an uproar. Some agreed with the king's decision. The faction was mostly composed of those who were previously victims of dragons. They no longer wanted to live in fear of dragons, and had they possessed the necessary strength in the first place, they would have already launched their own crusade against dragons. I support His Majesty's decision. So long as the mystery dragon in the north remains, our country will never experience true peace. Everyone, do you still wish to be oppressed by the dragons? Do you want to continue living under the fear of the dragons? Do you want to remain cowardly for the rest of your lives? However, there were also those who opposed the old king. This faction composed of those who had lost family, power, money, or other precious belongings in the previous Great War. They had no desire to lose anything else. If you want to die, then die alone. Don't bring us along. War will bring no benefit to us. Only death and destruction awaits us should His Majesty proceed with this plan. I have already lost my children and husband in the previous war. It's easy for those of you who avoided any losses to agree to this plan. How heartless. Should this crusade take place, the taxes that we'll have to pay would undoubtedly increase. Our harvest is decreasing every year, and we're facing a nationwide food shortage. Where on earth will we obtain the resources for this crusade? Despite the complaints, the lords of the nation had obediently complied with the old king's decision, and they had provided the old king with the resources required for his campaign. After all, the continent had already been unified. Dragons aside, the king's authority was second to none. Should the old king's ire be stoked, it would not be an understatement to say that millions of corpses would ensue. Alfred Graves' anger was not something they took lightly. As such, the preparation of the Grand Crusade against the mighty and mysterious dragon of the north was in full swing. While all this was happening, Max was slumbering peacefully in his cave. He was completely oblivious to the events taking place in the human world. The next day, by the time Max had woken up, the sun was already hanging high above his head. After stretching his muscles and bones, Max felt that the muscles and veins in his body had once again strengthened. As expected, reincarnating into a dragon comes with many perks. All it takes to grow stronger is a simple sleep. System, show me my current stats. Ding. Loading stats interface. True name, Max Agatha Hill Alexander. Race, Red Dragon, Lawful Evil. Current rank, Hatchling. Age, 1. Maximum lifespan, 12,000, Ancient Dragon. Attack, 31, Normal Red Dragon Hatchling 15. Spell Strength, 505, Normal Red Dragon Hatchling 25. Defense, 21, Normal Red Dragon Hatchling 10. Speed, 30, Normal Red Dragon Hatchling 13. Spells, Lightning Arrow Rain, Thunderstorm, Lightning Paralysis, Thunderclap, Light Affinity, Lightning Immunity, Thunderous Divine Retribution, 10 million volts of thunder. Abilities, Bite, Claw Strike, Stomp, Tail Swipe. Breath, Lightning, Strong Acid. Remarks, should any other dragon hatchling possess the same stats as you, this world would undoubtedly be ruled by the dragons. As expected, I've become stronger. Although his improvement was not as great as devouring the black dragon or Tahir, it was still decent. Max was not greedy. He was very satisfied with his speed of growth. However, Max's attention was quickly pulled away from the interface. A sad series of wails had grabbed his attention. Max turned around and spotted his sister, Mia. She seemed to be having a nightmare. Tears rolled down the corner of her eyes, and she seemed to be choking on her tears. It was truly a pitiful sight. Max sighed helplessly. It seemed that the departure of their mother, Agatha, had dealt a great blow to Mia. Max was not as cold and heartless as Agatha. He was an existence who had transmigrated, after all. Although his personality had begun to subtly change towards that of a dragon, as his only remaining family member, Max cherished her greatly. He needed to pull Mia out of her depression.
Hey everyone, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy the audiobooks, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. If you'd like to support us further, consider becoming a Patreon member. As a member, you'll gain the ability to request the next part of a novel audiobook I've uploaded, depending on your Patreon tier.
Mia. Wake up. Max used his dragon claw to gently knock on Mia's head. After being poked by Max, Mia slowly came to her senses. She opened her eyes, not knowing that there were still tears in the corner of her eyes. There was still a hint of confusion in the depths of her eyes. Brother, I had a nightmare. I dreamed that Mother left us, and that we were targeted by humans. Brother, you were killed cruelly to protect me. Max patted Mia's head helplessly. It's okay, it's just a nightmare. Let's not talk about these unpleasant topics. I'll treat you to something delicious to drive away your foul mood. Mia tilted her head in confusion and asked Max, Brother, are you going to treat me to camel meat? After experiencing human meat, camel meat no longer seems as attractive to me. Max nodded. Although he was still unwilling to admit it, the taste of human meat was really not something that camel meat could compare to. If a camel was as tempting as a roasted chicken drumstick, then the meat of a strong human was more akin to a grand feast. I assure you, you've never experienced what I'm about to treat you to today. Max said confidently to Mia. Although Mia did not know what meal Max was referring to, she could not help but drool upon hearing her brother's confident tone. After all, her brother had never lied to her before. Without saying anything else, Mia followed Max and left the cave. Fiercely flapping their wings, the two red dragons immediately took to the skies. To the random observer, it would seem as if they had vanished from the spot. Strong winds besieged the siblings in the skies. It seemed that it was not a good day to leave their cave. Max looked at the dark clouds in the sky and could not help but frown slightly. Nevertheless, he flapped the wings on his back again and broke through the dark clouds. As expected, once they had broken through the dark clouds, the howling winds subsided, and the gloomy weather was nowhere to be seen. Sunlight shone on the thick clouds, dyeing the clouds a shade of crimson. It was truly a beautiful sight to behold. Mia, who was behind him, felt much better after seeing such a beautiful scene. At this moment, Max turned his head to look at his sister, Mia, with some surprise. Isn't she supposed to be weak physically? Although he was flying at a leisurely pace this time, Max was certain that Mia would find it difficult to catch up to him. Unless she gave it her all, she would undoubtedly fall behind. This surprised Max. System, display Mia's stats panel. Ding dong. Soon, Mia's stats panel appeared in front of Max. True name, Mia Agatha Affendor. Race, Red Dragon, Lawful Evil. Current dragon rank, Hatchling. Age, 1. Maximum lifespan, 10,000, Ancient Dragon. Attack, 5, Normal Red Dragon Hatchling 15. Spell Strength, 277, Normal Red Dragon Hatchling 25. Defense, 7, Normal Red Dragon Hatchling 10. Speed, 14 plus 2.77, Normal Red Dragon Hatchling 13. Magic, Lightning Arrow. Abilities, Bite, Magical Acceleration. Breath, Lightning. Remarks, she managed to obtain an acceleration ability just by sleeping. Are you certain that Mia is not the protagonist of this story? Magical Acceleration. Max quickly found the description of the ability from his ancestors' memories. The red dragons who were weak, but had high magic aptitude would use this ability to enhance their flight speed. Of course, red dragons were capable of enhancing other aspects as well. There was also attack enhancement, defense enhancement, and so on. So long as one's spell strength increased, the enhancement they obtained would also increase. For example, with her 277 spell strength, magical acceleration would provide her with a 1% boost in speed. Thus, Mia gained a speed increase of 2.77. Although it was not much, for a red dragon hatchling, Mia was considered incredibly fast. After all, the only reason Max was this fast was due to the adult black dragon abilities that he had absorbed. Soon, Max had arrived at Deer Heart Village along with his sister. From their lofty position in the air, Deer Heart Village looked no bigger than a fist. Had it not been for Max's physical prowess, the village would likely have gone unnoticed. Max peered downwards and spotted the tribute that Deer Heart Village had prepared for Agatha, several camels. Brother, by delicacies that I've never experienced before, do you mean the camels? Mia revealed a puzzled look. After all, dragons rarely lied, thus, Mia was trying to figure out her brother's intentions. Max did not intend to say anything to Mia. He directly dived towards the ground with Mia. In one swift motion, Max pierced the body of the camels with his razor-sharp claws. There were also a few of the camels who were scared to death by Max's roar as he swooped down. Mia was waiting for Max to roast the camels, but Max in no hurry. Don't be anxious, my sister. Delicious food requires tedious preparation. Then, he brought the camels to Deer Heart Village. Although Max was only a dragon hatchling, Max was still a huge creature to the villagers. He was in the center of Deer Heart Village, and thus, all eyes were on him. The village chief walked forward shakily and spoke to Max with utmost respect. My honorable Lord Dragon Hatchling, I would like to inquire the reason for your visit. Is there anything that you require us pious servants to do? Although the village chief spoke with utmost respect, Max could sense a hint of anger in his eyes. It was as if he was complaining. It has only been a few days since Agatha's last visit. Why are you here again? Was our previous tribute insufficient? We painstakingly prepared those tributes. There is no longer anything that Deer Heart Village can provide you with. However, Max's words shocked everyone present. I need coarse salt, cumin, and all your spices. Give me coarse salt, cumin, and all of your spices. The village chief was shocked by Max's words. Don't dragons usually ask for treasure? Why is this dragon hatchling asking for spices? Could it be? Could this dragon know how to cook? The old village chief knew that red dragons were good at magic, and that they usually roasted their meals with their lightning breath. However, the village chief had never heard of dragons using salt and other seasonings to flavor their meal. The young dragon had spoken some truly shocking words. Naturally, the old chief was not at fault. After all, even the knowledgeable palace magician residing in the king's castle would also be dumbfounded if he were present. After all, Max's request was truly unprecedented. However, the old village chief dared not ask any further. He quickly lowered his head and stated respectfully, "No problem, Lord Dragon Hatchling. Your pious servant will prepare the items you've requested. How much spices do you require, my lord?" Max raised his eyebrows and said in a very domineering manner, "All of them." The old village chief trembled. "No problem. Please wait a moment, we will bring them to you." In less than 10 minutes, the old village chief had gathered all the spices and seasonings available within Deerheart village. After sorting them, he placed them in front of Max. Edible salt, cumin, pepper, chili powder. Max was very satisfied. He did not expect to see so many familiar spices from his previous world. With these, I'll be able to cook up a delicious barbecue. Stuff those berries into the camels' stomachs. Max used his sharp dragon claws to cut open the camel's stomach. The old village chief was stunned and quickly nodded. He called out to a few young people and stuffed the berries picked from the village into the camel. "I am very satisfied with the attitude Deerheart village." After speaking those words, Max left Deerheart village, along with the camels and seasonings. The old village chief had an embarrassed smile on his face. He waited for the two dragons to completely disappear from his sight before relaxing. "It's really strange. What's going on with those two red dragons? They didn't request for any treasure. All they asked for was seasoning and spices." The old village chief wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. After all, this was the first time Deerheart village had come into contact with the two dragon hatchlings alone. As he had no clue about their personalities, the chief had treated them with the utmost respect. Heck, had they requested to consume human flesh, the village chief was more than willing to sacrifice himself. "Chief, but how are we going to cook tonight?" Upon hearing the question from the woman behind him, he was also a little embarrassed. "Indeed, I've handed all of our spices and seasonings to Max. Are we going to eat unseasoned food like wild beasts tonight?" Losing all their spices and seasonings was one thing, but salt was truly an indispensable ingredient to their meals. The old village chief scratched his head and stated, "Let's distribute the remaining fruits to everyone first. According to my calculations, another caravan should visit Deerheart village in the next few days. When that time comes, we can purchase salt from them." The moment Max and Mia left Deerheart village, in the distance within the desert, a middle-aged man lowered his binoculars. The man muttered some words as he did so. He seemed to be in deep thought as he brought out a small booklet and began to write in it. The middle-aged man's appearance could not be any more ordinary. If there was anything special about him, it was undoubtedly the mechanical arms that were hidden by his long sleeves. Two red dragon hatchlings. They look around 3 years old. One of them looks as strong as a black dragon, whereas the other one looks frail and weak. Neither of them attacked and thus their abilities remain unknown. They do not seem to be accompanied by their mother. If a high-ranking official from the kingdom were to walk past this middle-aged man, they would undoubtedly cry out in surprise. They would probably think something along the lines of, "Isn't he the legendary dragon slayer, Bloom, who disappeared right before the Great War? Bloom Fredred." It was no understatement to say that his name had been engraved in the minds of everyone within the kingdom. In the past, whenever dragons encroached on humanity's territory, Bloom would use his mortal body to turn the tides and beat back the dragons. He was known to some as the protector of humanity. Was Bloom truly this powerful, you ask? No, compared to the three heroes, Bloom was simply an ordinary person. However, Bloom possessed unparalleled courage and wealth of dragon knowledge. Before the kingdom was unified, everyone thought that Bloom had died while challenging ancient dragons somewhere. After all, unless they were monstrous individuals like Tahir, the probability that a human would survive in a battle against an ancient dragon was less than 1%. Contrary to everyone's expectations, however, Bloom had survived, alas, at a price of losing both of his arms. At one point, Bloom was extremely depressed by the loss of both his arms. After all, despite his wealth of knowledge, he was still a cripple. However, the one that re-inspired hope in him was a mysterious mechanic who constructed a pair of mechanical arms for him. Armed with the mechanical arms, Bloom's strength ballooned to 300% of his original strength. With his knowledge and newfound strength, Bloom could finally live up to his title of Dragon Slayer. After leaving Deerheart Village, Max and Mia returned to their lair. Max placed the camels, which were stuffed with berries, in front of him. Then, he opened his mouth wide, and immediately after, an intense stream of lightning gushed out from his mouth. In an instant, the camels in front of him were roasted until they were charred on the outside and tender on the inside. Such an alluring color caused Mia, who mentioned that she was no longer interested in camels, to drool. "It's not over yet, my dear sister." Max smiled and directly took out the spoils of war that the old village chief had offered to him. He evenly sprinkled the coarse salt, cumin, pepper, and other condiments on the already roasted camels. Suddenly, a strong fragrance wafted in the air. Mia was famished. Her big tail constantly wagged behind her. Had Max not stopped her, she would have already wolfed down the camel meat before her. "What are you waiting for?" Max smiled. Mia immediately jumped onto the roasted camels and started eating. "It's so delicious, brother. I have never eaten anything so delicious." Max smiled and looked at Mia dotingly. The veil of sadness that surrounded her had been swept away by the delicious roasted camels. Deerheart Village. It was located in the northern part of the continent, near the mineral-rich Longsong Alley. It occupied an area of about 3,000 square meters, and there were about 20 people living there. If one were to judge based on appearances, Deerheart Village would look no different from an ordinary, unassuming desert village. No one would expect it to a settlement under Agatha's rule. Escape and resistance were not allowed. If not for the fact that Deerheart Village was located in the trade route that crossed the desert, the villagers would not have been able to hold on. They were like livestock in captivity, trembling in fear of the red ancient dragon. The sky had just revealed a hint of white, and the warm sunlight had just shone on the desert, when suddenly, a lone figure slowly approached the village from a distance. The middle-aged man who approached the village was slightly hunched over, and he carried a bag that was taller than an average adult. The middle-aged man's slender physique did not look particularly strong. However, contrary to the villagers' assumptions, he seemed to possess great strength in his arms. However, as the man had hidden both his arms in his sleeves, unless one observed carefully, they would not have noticed the mechanical nature of his arms. The middle-aged man that had approached the village was none other than Bloom. The guards of Deerheart Village had noticed Bloom from afar. The village chief had gathered the villagers to greet the visitor with open arms. "Greetings, traveler, may I inquire as to where you're heading to?" "On behalf of Deerheart Village, I welcome your arrival. Deerheart Village can provide most of the items you need for a small fee," the old village chief asked enthusiastically. Deerheart Village had been exploited by Agatha for a long time. Without a surefire means to make money, they would have perished a long time ago. Deerheart Village's method of making money was very simple. It was to receive tourists from all walks of life and to provide them with the resources they wanted. Such resources include camels, horses, clean clothes, and drinking water. Naturally, the cost of these resources were not cheap. Most of the goods provided by Deerheart Village were several times more expensive than those from the city. Therefore, every time a traveler were to pass by Deerheart Village, the villagers would make a killing. Bloom nodded and went straight to the point. "I came to Deerheart Village to investigate the red dragon that has been attacking this place. If memory serves, the dragon's name should be Agatha, right?" After hearing Bloom's words, the old village chief's cloudy eyes flashed with renewed vigor. The three heroes had died tragically in the desert. Although Deer Heart Village was isolated from civilization due to Agatha, news from the outside world was still passed to them via travelers. He did not expect anyone to come of their own volition, especially after the tragic death of the three heroes. As a result, the village chief was impressed with Bloom's bravery. Naturally, the village chief did not recognize Bloom. Although Bloom's name and reputation was known far and wide, how many had actually seen the Dragon Slayer in the flesh? Moreover, Bloom's appearance had changed drastically. It was to an extent that most of his former friends would not recognize him either. "Sir, although we admire your courage, I believe that it's necessary to advise you against your actions. You know not of Agatha's fearsome strength. Even the three heroes of the kingdom were no match for her. Compared to them, you look frail and weak. It's better for you to go home." Although the old village chief was not a good person, strictly speaking, the death of the three heroes was in part due to him. As such, his guilty conscience compelled him to persuade the traveler from throwing his life away. After all, Bloom did not have much muscle. Although he looked very experienced and calm, how could he put up a fight against Agatha without possessing enough strength? Moreover, should Bloom actually go and challenge Agatha, Deer Heart Village might come under attack due to the assistance the village had offered Bloom. Of course, the old village chief did not know that Agatha had already left this desert. Had the village chief learned that Max and Mia were the only dragons that remained, he would probably set off in a crusade and put an end to the thorns in his side. "I heard that His Majesty the King is also preparing to launch a crusade against the dragons. I doubt that you'd need to do anything." The old village chief had already done his best. Should his advice fall onto deaf ears, there was nothing else he could do. Bloom smiled faintly and said, "Mr. Village Chief, you don't have to worry. I have come across more dragons than you'd expect. If you could provide me with Agatha's habits or weaknesses, if any, it would be a great help to me. Oh yeah, the name's Bloom, by the way." Upon hearing the traveler's name, the village chief trembled violently. The old village chief's expression changed instantly, and he now looked at Bloom, as if he was a god that had decided to save Deer Heart Village. Are you actually Mr. Bloom?" Bloom nodded. His title of Dragon Slayer had brought him some convenience at times. A young man beside the village chief was somewhat puzzled. He did not understand the village chief's sudden shift in attitude. "Lord Village Chief, who is Mr. Bloom? Why are you so excited?" The old village chief turned his head and glared fiercely at the youth. "Mr. Bloom is a famous dragon slayer who was known throughout the continent a decade ago. The number of dragons that Mr. Bloom has slain is simply unimaginable. Although the three heroes might be stronger than Mr. Bloom in times of war, before dragons, Mr. Bloom's strength is second to none. Before dragons, the three heroes are no more than toddlers when compared to the likes of Mr. Bloom." The villagers were shocked at the village chief's words. "Oh my God, please save our village, Mr. Bloom. Please save our village. We have really been enslaved by that red dragon Agatha for far too long." Bloom smiled and said, "That's what I intend to do." Upon learning of Bloom's intentions, Deer Heart Village instantly went into an uproar. "That's great. The nightmare plaguing our village will finally come to an end. There is finally hope. Please let us treat you to a grand feast." The old village chief secretly wept tears and whispered, "My dear Emily, you can finally live in peace." Bloom could not help but grin when he saw the enthusiasm of the villagers of Deer Heart Village. "Everyone, you don't have to go this far. All I ask is information regarding Agatha." The mechanical arm hidden in Bloom's sleeve was slightly glowing at this moment. After an entire night of interacting with the villagers, Bloom had gained a wealth of information regarding Agatha, Max, and Mia. Bloom paid special attention to Max and Mia. After all, the two dragon hatchlings would serve as a great warm-up for Bloom. After learning all he could about the red dragons residing in the desert, Bloom left Deer Heart Village. Half a month had passed in the blink of an eye. Half a month was neither long nor short. During this period, Max and Mia's daily routine consisted of only eating and sleeping. As a result of Max's masterful cooking, Mia had gradually forgotten the pain of Agatha's departure, and before long, she had regained her cheerful attitude. However, one night, Max was startled awake by a certain ruckus. It was in the dead of the night, and Mia was still sleeping. Max had no intention of waking Mia up. Thus he silently snuck out, and with a soft flutter of his wings, he took to the skies and approached the source of the ruckus. At this moment, a dozen of fully armed soldiers riding on top of horses were advancing in an orderly manner. The leading soldier was holding a torch in his hand. About 50 to 60 meters away from this group of soldiers, there was another small group of soldiers moving about. As a former human, Max immediately understood what they were doing. They're searching the area. Max frowned slightly. He could not understand why the humans would suddenly encroach into the desert. Could it be because of those three adventurers from before? Max could not help but recall the three adventurers who had almost ended their lives in the past. Putting aside the swordsman and the woman, Max was certain that Tahir was a man of great status in the human world. Perhaps the humans have learned about Tahir's death, and they've come to seek revenge. Their targets are most likely me, Agatha, and Mia. Max feared that the humans had yet another monster like Tahir within their ranks. Thus he determined that the smartest choice would be to avoid battle. Even though Max was confident in his abilities to protect himself, not to mention the battle of existence, Max was unsure whether he could guarantee Mia's safety. After all, the system had told him once before, that unless someone were to protect Mia during her youth, it was unlikely for her to reach adulthood. We could settle the score with them once Mia has fully developed her abilities. By Max's rough estimation, Mia would surpass Tahir in terms of magical abilities in a century or so. In another 20 to 30 years or so, Max believed that Mia would finally be able to protect herself. A century was a very long time for humans. It was long enough for 1 or 2 generations of humans to be born. However, for ancient dragons who had a lifespan of 10,000 years, 100 years was equivalent to only 1 human year. As it stands to reason, 20 to 30 years was merely like the blink of an eye. Right as Max was about to return to his lair and bring Mia away, a robotic voice chimed in Max's head. Ding dong. Host Max, your tracks have been discovered by the human soldiers. Before long, the humans will locate your lair, and once you've been found by the kingdom's soldiers, you will be attacked continuously. Please choose how you'll respond to the situation. 1. Aren't they just some weak humans? Before the noble dragons, they are mere ants. Ignore the threat. Reward, Mia's probability of death increased by 500%. Before dying, Mia will learn an ability related to the language of death, and she will protect the host. 2. I am only a dragon hatchling at the moment. I am still not capable of taking on the human kingdom. Flee the lair. Reward, you will receive the undead spell, Undead Calamity. Upon death, you will immediately transform into an ancient undead dragon. As a result of this transformation, you will gain the enmity of the mother goddess Tiamat. 3. Dragons are not pushovers. Anyone who dares to invade the lair of a red dragon shall pay the price with their blood. Rise up and resist. Reward, Invincible Golden Body. Upon use, you will immediately become invincible. You will be impervious to all damage unless inflicted by gods. The ability lasts for 3 seconds. Cooldown time, 24 hours. Max was stunned. He did not expect the system to issue him these choices at this moment. As a loving brother, Max naturally ruled out the first option. There were countless ways to become stronger. Why did he have to sacrifice Mia? Moreover, Max had learned of his future potential via the previous 2 battle of existences. The strength the celestial being displayed was not something that could be obtained by sacrificing his sister, Mia. As for the second choice, it had left Max rather confused. He could not, for the life of him, understand why the system wanted him to become an undead dragon that badly. Moreover, the reward was an undead spell. Unless he died, it would never be activated. Obtaining that spell was essentially the same as giving up on his own life. On the other hand, the fact that would turn into an undead dragon upon death was in a sense the same as obtaining a second life. When all was said and done, the offer to immediately become an ancient dragon was an attractive proposition to Max, who was still a mere dragon hatchling. Although Max's gut was telling him to leave immediately, Max decided otherwise. Although obtaining a second life was extremely attractive, it was built on the premise of his death. Max then looked at the third option. Resist. Max gulped hard. Max had yet to display the full extent of his abilities ever since he absorbed Tahir's strength. Even Max himself was uncertain of his full power. All he knew was that he was very, very strong. Moreover, the invincible golden body ability was no less attractive to Max than the undead spell provided by the second option. After all, he would be immune to any damage that was not inflicted by the dragon god for 3 seconds. As long as he used it properly, even the dragon vanquishing ballista would be useless against him. More importantly, the third option had the least drawbacks. Max no longer hesitated and chose the third option. Ding dong. Detected that the host has chosen the third option. Rewards are being distributed. Congratulations to host for obtaining the ability, Invincible Golden Body. The moment Max received his reward, Max could instantly feel a thin golden membrane covering his already tough dragon scales. Unless one paid special attention, they would most likely not notice anything different about Max. At this moment, under the glow of the moonlight, Max's figure was like a giant bronze dragon, one that exuded an imposing yet majestic aura. Invincible Golden Body, huh? It truly lives up to its name. Max was very surprised by this slight change in his body. After all, he was the only person that realized the sheer defensive capabilities of the thin layer of membrane covering his body once it was infused with mana. Even if the 10 black dragons and the human mage, Tahir, had joined forces to use their strongest abilities on him, Max would still walk out unscathed. Their abilities would not even make a dent on his invincible golden body's defense. Max was now 200% confident that he would be able to take on the dragon vanquishing ballista that sent chills down his spine from before. Heck, at this point, he wagered that he could even take on the projectile while launching his own counterattack at the same time. I wonder how the humans will react once they realize that a mere dragon hatchling is capable of shrugging off a ballista shot that is capable of harming ancient dragons as powerful as Agatha. I bet it'll be interesting, to say the least. Upon this thought, Max became excited. However, his excitement only lasted for a moment, as Max immediately calmed himself down. Although the invincible golden body would greatly amplify his defense and increase his survival rate, it was of little use to Mia, who had a weak body. Now that he had officially decided to confront the humans head-on, he needed to come up with ways to protect Mia. Should I dig a hole for Mia, and have her hide there until I've defeated the humans? After all, digging was one of the specialties of red dragons. Even if they were to dwell underground for a long time, they would be completely fine. However, Max quickly crossed out the idea. After all, even if she was hidden underground, so long as he was not by her side, he could not completely discount the possibility of accidents. Marx did not want to lose his sister. After all, she was the only family member he had left. Ding dong. You need not worry, host. The ability, Invincible Golden Body, can also be cast on allies. The mechanical voice of the system rang out within Max's mind. Max's eyes lit up upon hearing those words. Holy sh*t, I'm allowed to cast this insanely overpowered spell on my allies. Please note, however, that if the Invincible Golden Body is cast on anyone who is not the host, the duration of the ability will be reduced to 0.25 seconds. 1/4 of a second. This is a full 12 times difference. Max could not help but click his tongue. Sure enough, there are limitations to its support ability. Otherwise, it is truly a heaven-defying skill. Although it would last only long enough to take on a single instance of damage. It should be enough for the current situation. Anti-aircraft weapons have yet to be developed in this world. As long as Mia is high enough in the air, the threat that she will face will be greatly reduced. At most, I would only need to be wary of mages or powerful weapons like the dragon-vanquishing ballista. Suddenly, a sharp glint suddenly flashed across Max's huge eyes. The two teams of human soldiers that he spotted earlier had begun to approach his lair. The two teams were composed of 15 well-equipped cavalrymen. They were maintaining a rather unique formation as they marched forward. Their formation had made it such that if any unexpected situation were to arise, the other members of their team would, if any unexpected situation occurred, the other members of the team would be able to immediately come to help. The leading soldier was holding an odd little box in his hand. The box seemed to contain a faint trace of magic power. It seemed to be some sort of magic tool. It's probably something like a signal flare. Max thought to himself. This is probably the human army's scouts. Should they spot me, or should they encounter danger, they would immediately notify the other teams to gain a better understanding of the situation. Had Max not powered up since absorbing the Black Dragon, atoms, Max would definitely have a hard time dealing with the 230-men scouting teams below him. However, as Max had already absorbed the strength of the Archmage, Tahir, he could annihilate both teams before their leaders could even trigger their magical signal flares. The fact that you've decided to encroach on the territory of red dragons means that you're prepared to be slaughtered, right? Mark spat coldly. At the same time, dense lightning began to gather around his claws. An instant later, 2 bolts of lightning were launched towards the 2 squads of soldiers below him. Everything had happened in a blink of an eye. Crackle. What's going on? What happened? Captain, activate the signal, quickly. We're in danger. My body isn't heeding my calls. No matter how fast the humans were, they were most likely below a fraction of the speed of lightning. Max had cast the lightning paralysis spell on the soldiers. He had robbed them of their ability to resist, and before long, the soldiers collapsed one after another like dominoes. Forget seeking help, none of the soldiers could even budge a single inch. It was all they could do to lie limply on the muddy ground. Stomp. 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 The ground shook and sand flew in the air. Under the faint moonlight, a huge figure that was the size of a small mountain slowly appeared before the soldiers. The huge wings of the figure slowly spread out. Its scarlet eyes were like dazzling rubies. Despite that, none of the soldiers could appreciate the beauty of the creature before them. After all, the creature that approached them was none other than Max. It's a dragon. A dragon has really appeared. Damn it, move body, move. Even though the soldiers in front of them were screaming with all their might, their bodies did not budge a single inch. It was as if their bodies were already dead, and only their souls were still alive. Marx did not intend to waste his breath on the human soldiers. He opened his mouth wide, and roasted the squad of 30 soldiers before him. Get up, Mia. I've prepared some breakfast for you. After finishing off the 2 squad of soldiers, Max returned to his lair and roused his sister awake. Get up, Mia. I've prepared breakfast for you. Although it was midnight, Max insisted that it was breakfast. Mia heard Max's call, and her eyes instantly snapped open. With Agatha gone, Max was now the head of the family. As the head, his word was law. Even if he were to order her to do something unbecoming of a dragon, Mia would not hesitate. Mia walked to Max's side and saw him cooking a large pile of roasted meat in front of her. The fragrance wafted into Mia's nostrils, and she could not help but slap her little paws on her face. It's roasted human meat. This is Mia's favorite meal. Upon realizing that Mia was imitating him, Max could not help but snap at her. Didn't I tell you not to imitate my actions? While shaking his head helplessly, Max tossed the human meat that he had roasted and seasoned to his sister. There are 60 of them in total. Enjoy the treat. We have a big battle to fight after this meal. We can't go hungry. Mia did not have any reservations against roasted human meat. In fact, now that Max had added seasoning to it, she was even more excited. Mia was a glutton through and through. She was wholly focused on eating the roasted meat, and Max's words had fallen onto deaf ears. Realizing that he could not get through to her, Max decided to withhold his explanation about the situation they were in until she had finished eating. If he were to split the 60 people into equal portions, both siblings would be entitled to 30 people each. This was more than enough for dragon hatchlings. Mia's was an extremely good meal after the scrumptious meal she had. She clapped her hands once again. All right, Mia, listen to me. Our lair is about to be discovered by the humans. A fierce battle is inevitable. I plan to strike first and teach a lesson to these impudent humans. I will exact a heavy toll unto them. Upon hearing Max's words, the proud genes of the dragon race within Mia seemed to have awakened. Her large, gem-like pupils instantly turned into a thin slit, and her emotions began to become slightly irritable. These humans deserve to die. I will obey your commands, brother. We must carve the fear of dragons within these human souls. Marx nodded and continued to instruct Mia. Before I let you loose, promise me one thing. You are not to carry out any actions that put your life at risk. All you need to do is to support me with your spells in the sky. I will face them alone. But, brother. Mia wanted to interject, but she was rudely interrupted by Max. Your life is of the utmost importance. Even if we were to lose this battle, there's always next time. However, once we lose our lives, we're gone for good. Mia hesitated for a long time before nodding. After all, compared to the trivial affairs of humans, Mia was more concerned about losing her brother. At the same time, in Longsong Alley, the various lords of the kingdom either came personally or sent their capable generals. Large numbers of troops were currently gathering. The lord of Longsong Alley, Ardarian, was pacing back and forth, as if he was anxiously waiting for something. In the distance, the loud sound of a trumpet suddenly rang out. Following which, a majestic army appeared from the direction of the imperial city. The army was incomparably luxurious, and all of their warhorses were armed to the teeth. Moreover, they had even brought 3 dragon-vanquishing ballistae with them. However, what attracted the attention of the onlookers was that within the center of the army was an extremely luxurious carriage. A large number of soldiers protected the carriage, as if to ensure that the individual within it would not come into harm's way. Each of the soldiers guarding the carriage were elites that were specially chosen throughout the continent. Each of them were capable of dealing with several ordinary soldiers on their own. Moreover, leading this attention-drawing army was a knight in dazzling silver armor. At this moment, he was turning around to look at the carriage, his eyes flashing with hesitation. Sheathed on his back were 2 massive greatswords. Each greatsword was inscribed with 3 runes. Moreover, the runes inscribed on it were in no way inferior to the red dragon slayer that Rafik lugged around. The knight took off his helmet. He was a middle-aged man with golden hair. He had an excellent temperament and had an indescribable attraction. Sir Calcis, you are finally here. I've been waiting for your arrival with great anticipation. Upon noticing the Imperial army's arrival, Ardarian quickly rushed forward to greet them. The knight before Ardarian was called Calcis, and he was the most powerful general within the kingdom. This time, Calcis was the commander of the Crusty against the mysterious dragon hiding in the north. Despite being the lord of Longsong Alley, Ardarian could not be presumptuous in front of Calcis. He needed to treat Calcis as if he were the king himself. After all, this was the authority that the king had bestowed upon Calcis. Moreover, not only did Calcis possess diamond-rank swordsmanship and combat ability, he also possessed great talent in magic. The combination of his talents in swordsmanship and magic had not only amplified his combat prowess linearly, in fact, it had resulted in an exponential boost. Better yet, not only was he a genius in combat, he was also a master when it came to the art of war. In the last war to unify the continent, Calcis had made great contributions to the old king. The number of enemies that Calcis had downed, both directly or indirectly, had numbered over 10,000. Ardarian dared not be discourteous to Chalcis just because he had a kind expression. After all, as the individual that contributed greatly to the king's plan to unify the continent, there was no way he could be a good individual. Once the battle began, the current Chalcis, who had an amiable smile, would instantly transform into a battle-hungry demon that would slaughter all his enemies. There was a saying that circulated in the continent. There is a chance that you would survive if you offend His Majesty. However, offending Sir Chalcis would undoubtedly lead to your death. Despite that, Chalcis did not have the time to chat with Ardarian at the moment. He shook his head and refused to exchange pleasantries with Ardarian. Just a day ago, Chalcis had already sent several advance teams to scout for traces of the mysterious dragon in the desert where Agatha was located. However, 2 teams had vanished without a trace. Something must have happened that caused them to lose contact with him. The scouts that Chalcis sent out were by no means weak. Even the weakest among them were of gold rank. Gold rank. Those who possessed this level of strength would instantly become honored guests in the homes of the weaker lords. They would not have to worry about food and drinks for the rest of their lives. As such, the fact that he had suddenly lost contact with them had meant that they were most likely dead. Chalcis was very pained by this line of thought. They have most likely encountered Agatha and her children, or the mysterious ancient dragon, and as a result, they lost their lives. Open the map and record the movements of all the returning advance investigation squads. Use that information to speculate the location of the 2 missing squads. Despite only just arriving at Longsong Alley, Chalcis had instantly gone to work. The soldiers behind him dared not laze around, and they immediately heeded his orders. About an hour later, a densely recorded map was handed to Chalcis by the soldiers. All the areas that had been investigated by the advance team were marked blue, and the only area that was not marked was a valley. In that very same alley was the lair of Max and Mia. The skyline in the distance was already beginning to brighten. Chalcis, who had been preparing for the entire night in Longsong Alley, was ready to put his plan into motion. Sir Chalcis, isn't this a waste of resources? The Lord of Longsong Alley, Ardarian, could not help but voice his concerns. Based on Chalcis' plan, the 100,000 troops that were sent by the kingdom would be split into 3 groups, and each group would take different routes to encircle the dragons within the valley. Not only that, each group had a good reserve of resources. Each group was armed with a dragon-vanquishing ballista of their own. As for the other resources such as magic tools and ammo, there was simply an astronomical supply of them. Ardarian roughly estimated that even if he were to empty out 10 Longsong alleys, he would still not be able to bring out this much resources. Fortunately, Chalcis was sent by the king, and with the cooperation of various lords, they were able to scrape together the resources required for the operation. However, even though Ardarian was not the one forking out the money for the operation, he still felt that it was a waste. Ardarian, are you doubting me? Chalcis turned his head and glared at Ardarian. Chalcis' eyes were ice-cold. The body of dragons are extremely tough. While normal adventurers are capable of taking down archaic dragons and below on their own. Once they become ancient dragons, it would be as if they were reborn. At that point, their strength would put them as one of the top life forms within the continent. It is not an exaggeration to call ancient dragons walking disasters. Were it not for the lack of capital, I would have requested for even more resources. What we have now is still not enough to secure our victory. Ardarian gulped audibly and recalled Agatha's figure. Although Agatha had always been plundering the resources of Longsong Alley, she was a reasonable dragon, and she had not once tried to massacre the entirety of Longsong Alley. Therefore, Ardarian knew not of the true strength of the ancient dragon, Agatha. Despite being a diamond rank, Chalcis was so cautious. Meanwhile, Ardarian, who was merely an ordinary person, had dared to question Chalcis' strategy. Upon realizing this, Ardarian's back was immediately drenched in sweat. Had Agatha seriously attempted to wipe out Longsong Alley, even 10,000 Ardarians would be incapable of mounting a defense against her for more than a second. However, there existed two such monstrous entities within the desert north of Longsong Alley, and this was discounting the two child dragons that Agatha had given birth to. Once the two dragon hatchlings had grown up, the threat that Longsong Alley would have to face was no laughing matter. Ardarian gritted his teeth, and steeled his resolve. "Sir Calcis, I am sorry for doubting your judgment. You're right, if we wish to slay ancient dragons, we must give them our all. This is the key to Longsong Alley's treasury. Please feel free to use the resources within as you wish, Sir Calcis." Ardarian's subservient attitude had gladdened Calcis greatly. "In that case, I'll hold you to your word. I'll have you hand over all the gemstones within your treasury to the army. I'll report your contribution to His Majesty later." Following this, Calcis grabbed the key to Longsong Alley's treasury, and ordered his men to move out the gemstones in the treasury in huge numbers. Ardarian was dumbfounded. Good heavens, you ever heard of something called moderation? Once Calcis had finished looting Longsong Alley's treasury, he then led his army off. "Felix, you will lead your troops to attack the dragon's lair from the southwest. Gallio, you will be in charge of attacking from the northeast. I will be in charge of the frontal assault." Felix and Gallio were both famous individuals within the kingdom. Their fame rivaled that of the three heroes. After all, Felix, Gallio, and Calcis were from the army. They were not a ragtag bunch of adventurers. First off, we have Felix. He was nearly 2 meters tall, and despite his muscular physique, he was a mage. However, the magic staff that Felix used was vastly different from that of an ordinary mage. The magic staff was as thick as an adult's thigh, and to some, it looked like a huge pillar. There were all kinds of spells engraved on it. However, even if there were no spells engraved on it, and if it were used like a blunt staff, an ordinary person would still be crushed by its weight. On the other hand, Gallio looked ordinary, but in truth, he was the leading alchemist in the nation, and he was especially well versed in explosives. In battlefields that required widespread destruction, Gallio alone could rival an entire army. The three did not waste any time, and they immediately set off with their respective armies. "Everyone, I wish you good luck. No matter how strong ancient dragons are, they are nothing before our determination." Calcis drew his huge sword from his back and roared. "They are nothing before our determination." The soldiers behind him burst forth with strong morale at this moment. In an extremely remote desert oasis, a figure appeared at this moment. The middle-aged man held a fruit that was the size of a human head in his hand. A satisfied expression appeared on his face. Dragon vanquishing fruit. It is the most important material in creating dragon annihilation missiles. It contains an extremely potent irritant to dragons. Just smearing it on a dragon's body can cause great discomfort to the dragon. At high potencies, it can even be used to create a concoction that can corrode the outer scales of dragons. Alas, it is difficult to obtain these fruits. Otherwise, if we were to produce it in large quantities, humanity might be able to push back ancient dragons en masse. The middle-aged man was the dragon slayer, Bloom. At this moment, he was preparing for a battle against Agatha, Max, and Mia. When it came to slaying dragons, Bloom believed that preparation was the key to success. After all, humans were fragile beings. If not for their intelligence and schemes, they would be no match against dragons. Bloom believed that although the dragons were strong, they still had their weaknesses. For example, although black dragons had strong physical bodies, they were inept when it came to magic. On the other hand, silver dragons were indecisive, and oftentimes, they would put themselves in disadvantageous spots, allowing Bloom to take their lives in a single move. Regardless, the red dragons he intended to face this time had no particular weakness to speak of. However, Bloom already had an idea. Since Agatha was difficult to deal with, he would start off by slaying her children. After about 10 minutes, Bloom slowly sat down. Behind Bloom, laid 2 to 3 dragon vanquishing fruits. Bloom carefully cracked open the hard shell of the 3 fruits to reveal a foul-smelling liquid within them. The liquid was extremely corrosive to humans. Should even a single droplet make contact with his skin, said patch of skin would immediately shrivel and die off. However, it was also this corrosive property that enabled it to soften the tough scales of dragons. Once softened, dragons, which usually had no other weaknesses aside from their reverse scales, would become full of weaknesses. At that point, even a fisherman's harpoon was capable of piercing through the weakened dragon's defenses. Nevertheless, while powerful, the dragon vanquishing fruit's effects did not last long. Its corrosive effect will wear off once 30 seconds had gone by, and the dragon's scales would regain their hardness. Further behind Bloom stood a huge magical contraption. At first glance, one would assume that it was a cannon. In actuality, it was indeed a cannon. It was a magical cannon which weighed hundreds of pounds, and the only reason Bloom was able to effortlessly lug it around was due to his mechanical arms. Otherwise, one would most likely be crushed to death if they tried to carry it. Within the barrel of the cannon, a missile-shaped conical steel cannonball had been installed. It was engraved with several complicated, yet intricate magic patterns. Bloom brought out the missile and opened the missile's head to reveal a groove within it. Following this, he poured the juice of the dragon vanquishing fruit into it. Then, the fine patterns that were carved onto the missile began to emit a dark purple light. Dragon Annihilation Missile, successfully crafted. Looking at the cannonball in his hand, Bloom's weathered face could not help but reveal a smile. For a moment, he was filled with great elation. The missile was a contraption that he had been working on before he left the kingdom. Alas, Bloom's genius was not recognized yet back then. Although they were aware of his rich knowledge of dragons, they treated him like an outsider when it came to magic tools. They doubted that he was capable of crafting a dragon annihilation missile. Nevertheless, as things now stood, the only long-range weapon that rivaled the dragon vanquishing ballista in strength was the dragon breath bolts. However, the dragon breath bolts were close-range artillery shells. Should they be fired from a long distance, their power would be greatly reduced. As such, the dragon breath bolts were awkward to use in actual combat. To make things worse, the dragon breath bolts required 2 seconds to accumulate energy. Dragons were not stupid and thus, they would not sit idly by as the weapon charged itself. As a result of this flaw, more often than not, the humans would need to risk their lives to utilize the dragon breath bolt. As such, once the dragon vanquishing ballista was successfully developed, the dragon breath bolts were instantly ignored. While the cheap costs of the dragon breath bolts had made them easy to manufacture as compared to dragon vanquishing ballistae which required the body parts of dragons, it did not make up for their fatal weaknesses. The ability of the dragon vanquishing ballistae to use long-ranged attacks was crucial to humans. On the other hand, although the range of the dragon annihilation missiles were not too different from the dragon breath bolts, the greatest benefit was that they did not need to be charged. All it took was a simple pull of a trigger, and thus, even regular humans were capable of firing it. A sense of pride welled up within Bloom as he observed his grand creation. Had he developed this weapon back in the past, he would not have lost his arms in the first place. Back to Max's side. After having a sumptuous breakfast with Mia, Max took her out of the lair. However, before leaving, Max made sure to craft 3 dragon skeletons out of the bones he found within the lair. After all, as far as the humans were concerned, their mother, Agatha, was still residing within the northern desert. However, to Max, the desert was now an indispensable base for his future operations. Max did attempt to hide Mia on the ground. Instead, he flew high into the sky. He would hide her up there instead. The weather that day was not bad. The sky was filled with dark clouds. It was an extremely rare weather in the desert. Through the cracks within the clouds, Max would occasionally catch glimpses of the situation below him. On the other hand, the humans were clueless as to what was happening in the air. "Brother, why are they attacking us?" In the sky, Mia asked Max in confusion. "There are all sorts of reasons, sister." Max looked into the distance. He had already noticed the large army advancing rapidly from the northwest. There were over 30,000 soldiers in the army, and each of them was armed to the teeth. They carried all sorts of stellar equipment with them. Moreover, the muscular man in the lead looked like a difficult individual to deal with. System, show me his stats. Ding dong. No problem, showing stats now. Name, Felix. Race, human. Current rank, platinum. Age, 47. Maximum lifespan, 96. Attack, 30, normal human 12. Spell strength, 29, normal human 3. Defense, 14, normal human 5. Speed, 9, normal human 8. Magic, Ripple Overdrive 1, Oath of Gold and Stone, Profound Protection, Casus Bonfire. Remarks, a close combat mage who cultivates both magic and martial arts. He possesses extraordinary attack and spell strength. He can be considered a powerful existence within the human world. After looking at Felix's stats panel, Max clicked his tongue. To think there exists someone who rivals my strength within the human world. While Felix was no monster like Tahir, his attack stat was close to Max's own. Fortunately, Felix's defensive ability was not that impressive. Max was certain that he had the upper hand in a one-on-one battle. Moreover, brute strength was not the only ability that Max possessed. The massive amount of abilities and spell strength that he had obtained after devouring Tahir had also given Max's a huge advantage over Felix. The army would reach our lair in 10 minutes or so. Mia, once they enter our lair, unleash your lightning breath on them. Understand? Mia nodded her head, but she was slightly confused. The memories she had inherited had told her that sneak attacks were unbefitting of the noble race of dragons. However, as it was an order from her brother, she did not hesitate. I believe that this is a reference to Ham and Overdrive from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Golden grains of sand whizzed in the air as dark clouds filled the sky. No one knew when rain would finally fall upon the dry desert region. Report, the mountain boar squad has located the excrement of dragons. Report, the hunting hound squad has discovered the footprints of the giant dragon. Sir Felix, the cruel lizard squad has located food residue. They reason that a dragon lair is nearby. Piece after piece of information came to Felix's notice as he peered forward at the mountain ridge before him with his massive staff in hand. Everyone, maintain a level 1 alert. Be prepared to fight against a dragon at any time. Felix ordered as he got off his horse. The 2-meter-tall Felix closed his eyes slowly and stuck his staff into the ground as he muttered something softly. Wind spirits, heed my call and describe what you've witnessed. This was the tracking magic that Tahir had used previously, Wind Speak. It was also thanks to this powerful ability that had allowed Tahir to locate Max back then. Obviously, Felix was not as strong as Tahir. Although Wind Speak's effective had been magnified by several magnitudes due to the desert terrain, as Felix was only a platinum rank mage, it was impossible to match Tahir's search range. Compared to Tahir's search range that covered almost half of the desert, Felix's search range had covered only a little more than 500 meters. At the same time, his search accuracy was also not as accurate as Tahir's. The difference in spell strength of more than 100 times was not something that could be easily bridged. After searching for a few minutes, Felix suddenly opened his eyes. A hint of excitement flashed past his eyes. I found them. Felix said excitedly. With the use of Wind Speak, Felix had located 3 gigantic silhouettes within a cave. They're definitely dragons. The dragons haven't even noticed us, and they're still sleeping soundly in their cave. As expected, these arrogant and stupid dragons could not compare to the intelligent and brave humans. They are inches away from death, and yet they're still sleeping. Dying in their sleep. That's simply pathetic. Sir Felix, have you located it? The soldier beside him could not help but ask when he saw Felix's excited expression. Yes, but it's not the mysterious dragon in the rumors. It's the ancient dragon Agatha, and her 2 dragon hatchlings. Huh? Doesn't this mean that we've located the wrong target? We have to report this to Sir Casus and come up with a new plan. The soldier beside him could not help but feel disappointed and said in annoyance. Felix snorted. This operation is a crusade against the dragons. Sir Calcis has incorporated all the dragons in his strategy. Lady Luck is not on Agatha's side. Her death is imminent. Felix licked his dry lips in excitement. Calcis had assigned each of their armies a dragon-vanquishing ballista, and 5 slaying ballista, and 5 dragon-vanquishing bolts. The ballista was a great weapon that could easily penetrate the scales of ancient dragons. Better still, all 3 dragons were asleep, and completely unaware of the human army lying in wait. To Felix, this was an opportunity of a lifetime. There was not a single soul on the continent who did not recognize Bloom's name. The reputation that Bloom held was something that Felix had yearned for, and in this moment, the opportunity to gain such a reputation had finally presented itself. Felix was 80% certain that so long as he targeted Agatha's vital points with the dragon-vanquishing ballista, Agatha would instantly be knocked out of the fight. A dragon that had lost its ability to fight was like a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. Moreover, according to the information he had gained from Windspeak, Agatha also had her children by her side. Without Agatha's protection, there was no way the dragon hatchlings would escape. According to reliable information of the wind spirits, Agatha and her children are sleeping in the cave. They have not discovered us yet. Now is the best time for us to make our move. Moldy Bread Squad 1, Mountain Hound Squad, assemble the dragon-vanquishing ballista immediately. Iron Maiden Squad, prepare the dragon-vanquishing bolts. We have only one's chance. Once we make our move, we must take down Agatha with lightning speed. Should we fail here, the consequences will be disastrous. Felix mounted his horse and approached the cave with his most trusted subordinates. The Moldy Bread Squad and the Mountain Hound Squad, who had already finished assembling the dragon-vanquishing ballista, followed closely behind Felix. On the dragon-slaying ballista, the pure black dragon-vanquishing arrow was flickering with a cold glint. The Iron Maiden Squad that was in charge of arming the bolts was also ready to reload at any time. The remaining troops were also on standby, and they were surrounding the lair. "What are you trying to do, Felix?" Just as Felix was about to step into the lair, a regal voice suddenly came from behind him. Felix turned around and saw that it was Calcis. The 3 huge armies had officially gathered, and they had successfully blocked off the surroundings of the cave. Countless traps and archers were already in place. They only needed to give the order to form an inescapable net. In the sky, Max, who was observing all of this, clicked his tongue. The humans have expended great amount of resources to deal with me. This is definitely a costly venture that requires the cooperation of several lords. Sir Calcis, I have already used Windspeak to probe the cave. Have confirmed that Agatha and her children are sleeping inside. Our presence has gone unnoticed. As long as we launch an attack now and give Agatha a fatal blow, we will be able to save a large portion of our resources. Felix quickly explained the situation to Calcis. After all, in the original strategy, Felix was supposed to wait for the 3 armies to gather before launching their operation. However, Felix had acted on his own accord. It was no wonder that Calcis was so angry. After hearing Felix's explanation, Calcis thought for a while before answering, "Will you take responsibility for whatever comes next?" "Of course, I'm willing to swear on my life," Felix said excitedly. Gallio said coldly, "I hope that you're not trying to claim all the glory for yourself. Careful that you'll bite more than you can chew." Yes, this is what's written. Out of the 3 generals present, Felix was the only one who had the aptitude for wind magic. In other words, Felix was the only who could cast Windspeak. Nevertheless, Calcis was not so trusting of Felix that he would scrape the entirety of his plan just because of his statement. Calcis peered forward at the seemingly endless lair before him. "Iron Whip Squad, enter the lair and investigate. Make sure to remain as quiet as possible." Calcis waved his hand and ordered the Iron Whip Squad. The Iron Whip Squad will do as we're told. The Iron Whip Squad was Calcis' most trusted squad. It consisted of only 5 members. Although they were the smallest unit in the army, no one dared to look down on them, especially when it came to their field of expertise, scouting. The Iron Whip squad tiptoed as they approached the cave. They did not plan ignite a fire, nor did they dare to use any magical items. After all, their supposed targets were red dragons, a race that were the absolute authority when it came to using magic. Even the slightest fluctuation of magic would not escape their perception. On the other hand, they had held off against using flames, as it would alarm the bats and attract the attention of the dragons. Although they would gladly give up their lives for the kingdom, it did not mean that they would carelessly squander it. Finally, an arduous half an hour, they located 3 massive silhouettes some distance away from them. Suddenly, a howling gust of wind arose within the lair, and as a result, it had misled the Iron Whip squad into thinking they were dragon cries. They looked at each other and nodded. The targets had been confirmed, Sir Felix's information was correct. Soon, they quietly turned around and slowly snuck their way out again. Rumble. Lightning flashed directly from the thick dark clouds in the sky. Then, a heavy downpour rained down from the sky. By the time the Iron Whip squad had returned, it was already raining cats and dogs. Reporting to Sir Calcis, Sir Felix's report is accurate. There are indeed 3 giant dragon-shaped creatures in the cave. The captain of the Iron Whip squad did not confirm that the figures were indeed dragons. After all, there was limited light within the cave, and it was all they could do to make out the figures' shapes. Very good. Calcis nodded. Satisfied, he then stated, in that case, let's start the operation. A-class squads, follow me. We will form the vanguard. B-class squads, assist those in the A-class. As for those from the C-class, you're on standby. Make sure that you're prepared for battle at any time. Leave one of the ballistae here and target the lair's entrance. You are not to fire the ballista under any circumstances unless I've given the order. As for the other 2 ballistae, the A-class squads would be in charge of them. We will bring them into the lair and deal a fatal blow to those dragons. Remember, Agatha is our main priority. The dragon hatchlings are not worth squandering our dragon vanquishing bolts on. Calcis barked one order after another. Felix, Gallio, accompany me into the cave. Be ready for anything that might come your way. Understood. Roger. After exchanging a glance at each other, they then followed Calcis into the cave. The cave was already dark to begin with. However, as a result of the gloomy weather, the visibility within it had been reduced even further. Gallio could not help but frown. He took out a fluorescent potion from his pocket, and used it as a light source to move forward. Calcis and Felix did not say anything. After all, it was only a fluorescent potion. The likelihood of it being noticed by the dragons was low. The wheels of the dragon vanquishing ballistae made slight creaking sounds as it traveled into the cave. This, combined with the violent howls of wind and rain outside, had made the atmosphere somewhat terrifying. How much further do we have to go? Calcis asked Felix in a low voice. We're here, Sir Calcis. Felix hurriedly replied. Everyone looked up and saw 2 black shadows that were 3 to 4 meters tall hiding in a corner not far away. Further behind those 2 figures, however, was a massive black shadow that was as huge as a hill. The massive shadow was incomparably majestic, and just its figure alone had emitted an intense pressure that stifled one's breathing. Calcis frowned. Although they were still dozens of meters away from Agatha, the pressure she exerted was capable of suffocating some gold-rank soldiers. Dragons are indeed the most terrifying entities on this continent. However, now that we've gained the tools to slay dragons, this is no longer a one-sided slaughter. Agatha, this world does not belong to dragons. Nay, it belongs to us humans. Calcis muttered to himself as he gradually stretched his arm upwards. Beside him, Felix and Gallio exchanged a quick glance before immediately stepping back. The soldiers behind him were also ready to attack. Calcis was signaling them to ready the dragon-vanquishing ballistae. Once Calcis lowered his arm, they would have to fire both dragon-vanquishing ballistae at the same time. Creak creak. Both dragon-vanquishing ballistae had been adjusted to target Agatha's head. Even if Agatha was powerful and possessed tough dragon scales, it was impossible for her to take on the dragon-vanquishing ballistae head-on without being prepared. Agatha experienced the fear of death. Dragon-vanquishing ballistae, fire! Calcis roared angrily as his outstretched hand suddenly fell towards Agatha's direction. The muzzle of the dragon-vanquishing ballistae emitted a glow that illuminated the pitch-black cave. The enormous dragon-vanquishing bolts cut through the air and slammed into Agatha. Boom! Suddenly, a bolt of lightning descended from the sky. The lightning instantly blinded the entire cave. At this moment, the pupils of everyone present shrunk to the size of pinholes, and they were all extremely shocked. The figure they had assumed was Agatha was nothing but an assemble of bones, rotten meat, and mud that had been melded together under high temperatures. We've been tricked. Dragons are capable of trickery. Impossible. Dragons are a noble race that would not resort to such despicable tactics. No, the high temperatures required to meld these components together could only be achieved by red or blue dragons. Calcis frowned and immediately turned to look at the sky outside the cave and said slowly, "We have been played." Noticing that the human army had already sensed something was amiss, Max snorted coldly in his lofty position in the air. "It's time. Mia, assist me but remain in the sky. Unless I've given my permission, you are not allowed to leave the protection of the clouds." Max turned around and told Mia. His tone was extremely strict, and he left no room for her to refute him. Mia nodded. She too had realized how dangerous the dragon-vanquishing ballista was. Without the thick clouds to obscure her presence, Mia would most likely be immediately discovered by the 100,000-strong human army. Even her mother, Agatha, would be at a great disadvantage against such a terrifying weapon. Should the dragon-vanquishing bolt ever land on Agatha, she would most likely be taken out of the fight. However, due to her proud nature, she would not flee, and as a result, the only thing that awaited Agatha would be death. If such a weapon was capable of taking down a powerful being like Agatha, how would the weak and frail Mia end up? Mia was certain that she would not survive the impact from the dragon-vanquishing bolt. Mia knew that if she were to attack the humans now, she would only be able holding back her brother, Max. This was in spite of her ancestors' memories telling her not be a coward. After all, she owed her life to her brother, and thus, she did not mind suppressing her instincts to obey his orders. Mia nodded, and a hint of nervousness flashed in her eyes. "Brother, you have to be careful. Don't worry, I won't fight a battle that I'm not confident in. Just stay in the sky and watch how your brother defeats these lowly humans. Once we're done, I'll treat you to human barbecue again." Following this, Max then concealed his presence as he flew towards the direction of his lair. Max flew at breakneck speeds. In terms of flight speed, red dragons were slower only to black dragons who possessed strong physiques, as well as silver dragons. However, as Max had absorbed the power of a black dragon, Max's current flight speed had far surpassed the limits of ordinary red dragon hatchlings. An average human would only be able to catch a blur if Max were to fly past them at his greatest speeds. This, compounded with the fact that it was raining cats and dogs in the desert, had made it easy for Max to avoid the humans' line of sight. Whoosh! In less than 10 seconds, Max had arrived at the lair from his original position, which was over 1,000 meters high in the sky. What? What on earth was that? Its speed is really too fast. Our naked eyes weren't able to notice it at all. Nevertheless, one of the platinum-rank soldiers had caught sight of Max's figure. Upon realizing that they were up against a dragon, his pupils instantly shrunk to the size of a pinhole. "Everyone, we are now on a level 1 alert," the soldier immediately shouted. However, as his rank was not as high as the acclaimed generals of the army, most of his comrades did not budge at all. "Who do you think you are, Tucker? You are but a middle-grade squad leader. Even if your strength is slightly above ours, you are far too arrogant. Do you think that just because you're stronger than us, you can order us around? Don't think just because Sir Calcis, Felix, and Gallio are gone, you can take the lead here. At this moment, a bunch of disdainful eyes were trained on him. After all, among the 100,000 human troops that had gathered, only a minor few had come from the imperial city. Most of the human troops present had belonged to the various lords of the nation. They had only participated as a token of their lord's goodwill towards the old king. As a result, aside from the cream of the crop, Calcis, Felix, and Gallio, the soldiers refused to submit to anyone else. A hint of despair flashed in the eyes of this middle-grade squad leader named Tucker. It's too late. That was clearly a dragon. This group of idiots have no idea as to what kind of being has just flashed past us. The torrential rain continued to lay siege to the desert. However, the rain was not the soldiers' only enemy. Suddenly, seemingly out of nowhere, the soldiers who were stationed outside the lair's entrance had been turned into mincemeat by Max's viciously sharp claws. Spurt. Fresh blood shot out like fountains. The entrance to the lair was now dyed in deep crimson. Whoosh! The direction of the wind in the cave had changed. At this moment, Calcis sensed something. He immediately pulled out a great sword from his back and brought it in front of his chest. Everyone, prepare for battle. Something has entered the cave and is approaching us at an extremely fast speed. Calcis' voice was like a heavy hammer, and it startled everyone present to attention. Squads manning the dragon vanquishing ballista, hurry up and load the second dragon vanquishing bolts. Do it as fast as possible. Otherwise, it will be too late. It's a red dragon. In truth, Felix was the first to learn of the situation outside the lair with the use of his wind speak. He was utterly dumbfounded by how powerful Max was. After all, the soldiers standing guard were elites who were armed to the teeth. Unless they had encountered a creature that was beyond an ancient dragon in strength, they should not have been slaughtered this quickly without the use of magic. However, Felix had witnessed the truth with his very own eyes. All of the soldiers who had perished were victims of the dragon's claws, and nothing else. The dragon had executed the soldiers in one swift move. It had no extraneous movements in its attack whatsoever. To Felix it looked as if the dragon was swatting at mosquitoes, in other words an effortless task. This isn't Agatha, such strength should belong to a black dragon instead. At this moment, the two squads that were in charge of loading the dragon vanquishing ballistae had heard Felix's orders and immediately set off to work. Although their bodies were shivering from terror, they still hurriedly loaded the ballistae. However, at this moment, the rapidly advancing black shadow had already closed in. To them, the black shadow as like devil incarnate. Quick, target the entrance of the lair. Felix roared. These people are hopeless. You'd better focus on protecting yourself instead, Felix. Gallio snorted coldly as he took out various alchemy reagents from his pocket. Calcis remained silent. However, judging from his expression, he seemed to agree with Gallio's words. Felix initially wanted to refute. However, just moments later, the black shadow had already arrived in front of them. Max did not hold back at all. Terrifying thunderbolts were rapidly condensing in his mouth. The thunderbolts glowed a regal purple, and they were like dangerous snakes that constantly slithered in and out of Max's mouth. They threatened to burst out at any time to obliterate everything before them. Dragon breath. Thunderous divine retribution. Crackle. 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 Boom. Thunderous divine retribution. Terrifyingly powerful bolts of lightning were unleashed from Max's mouth. Max's thunderbolts were like Zeus' thunderbolts in myths. They were insanely powerful, and they had instantly blinded the entire cave with a divine radiance. However, before the divine radiance, the lowly mortals who were below platinum rank were immediately erased from existence. There was no blood and there was no pain. Everything had happened in an instant. Without even experiencing an ounce of agony, the gold-rank soldiers were immediately swallowed up by the thunderous divine retribution, and were instantly turned into ashes. Moreover, as a result of the thunderous divine retribution's power, the lair's walls emitted waves of singed odor. However, the power of the thunderous divine retribution was not that simple. After wiping out the humans who were below platinum rank, Calcis learned of the true strength of the thunderous divine retribution the hard way. An ear-piercing buzz resounded within the minds of Felix, Galio, and Calcis after the initial impact of the skill. It was as if a stun bomb had exploded right in front of their faces. It had taken them great difficulty to mount any sort of defense against the continuous waves of thunderbolts. Bzz. Bzz. Crackle. With only one greatsword to mount his defense, Calcis was on the verge of being blown away by the powerful thunderbolts. He could feel the soil under him rapidly burning away, and once gone, he was certain that he would meet his demise at the hands of the thunderous divine retribution. At the same time, Calcis also thought to himself, "Thank God I'm not facing this ability unprotected. I shudder just thinking about what would happen if I were unarmed." At this moment, Calcis had no choice but to bring out his second greatsword behind his back. He layered the second greatsword on top of the first one to form a cross, and shouted loudly, "Luminous cross/shield." Buzz. A powerful construct made out of light burst forth from the two greatswords. In an instant, a protective barrier that was as thick as an adult human's arm was formed, safely protecting Calcis within it. Meanwhile, Galio and Felix had also used their trump cards to defend themselves. Galio gulped down a bottle of dark brown viscous liquid, following which, fine black lines began to appear across his body. At the same time, both of his eyes had turned pure black. Long black hair began to grow all across his body, and at this moment, Galio looked no different from a caveman. However, this ugly appearance had bestowed Galio with an incomparably powerful strength. He brought both of his arms before him, and while his skin that had taken the brunt of the blow was slightly burnt, the thunderous divine retribution did not pose any real threat to Galio at all. On the other hand, Felix was not faring as well as the other two generals. He was merely an ordinary close combat mage. Although he possessed strength that ordinary people could not match, his strength was ultimately inferior to Galio's mutation as well as Calcis' luminous cross/shield in such a situation. Felix's eyes narrowed as he gripped his staff that was as thick as a pillar tightly. Soon, a layer of pale blue light quickly enveloped the staff. "Heya!" Felix roared angrily, and the veins on his arm bulged as power erupted from him. Oath of Gold and Stone. Ripple Overdrive. The staff in Felix's hand was instantly imbued with two different spells. The countless complicated patterns on the staff lit up at this moment. Then, a layer of earthen yellow and light red extended from the staff and enveloped his body. The Oath of Gold and Stone had allowed Felix to temporarily absorb the metal elements in the earth. They would form a protective layer on the surface of his skin, and at the same time, it would also strengthen Felix's physical attributes by several magnitudes. As for Ripple Overdrive, it would enhance Felix's perception, thought speed, movement speed, and magic releasing speed greatly. By doing so, it would, usually, allow him to locate weak spots in his opponent's attacks. Under the double protection of both spells, the intense feeling of danger that he was experiencing from before had disappeared. Following this, he then placed his thick staff before him to block the thunderbolts from the thunderous divine retribution. However, even with the two buffs, both of Felix's arms were beginning to emit a burning smell. Nevertheless, compared to losing his life, he was more than willing to bear this pain. Felix gritted his teeth, and forcefully blocked the terrifying thunderbolts from the thunderous divine retribution. Max's thunderous divine retribution did not last very long. By rough estimates, it had lasted for around 20 seconds. However, to Felix, Calcis, and Galio, those 20 seconds felt like an eternity. Indeed. The only humans left alive in the lair were Calcis, Felix, and Galio. The hundreds of soldiers who had accompanied the three generals had disappeared without a trace. All that remained of the soldiers was the thick layer of ash covering the ground. Calcis stepped on the ash-covered ground, deep in thought. Some distance away, the dragon-vanquishing ballistae had been toppled over, and both of their outer shells had been burnt to charcoal by the thunderous divine retribution. I didn't expect the proud dragon race to abandon their dignity and resort to such sneak attacks. Interesting indeed. Calcis lowered his greatsword slightly and glared coldly at Max. What do you mean by resorting to sneak attacks? Human, don't tell me that you find yourselves righteous. After all, weren't you trying to launch a sneak attack on our lair? Max sneered. Of course we're righteous. We humans are the favored children of heaven and earth. We are an existence that exemplifies courage, wisdom, and humility. On the other hand, you dragons are evil. So long as you exist, the world shall know not of peace. Calcis stated coldly. Max shook his head and refused to communicate any further with the hypocritical human before him. In this world, the strong preyed on the weak. Talking big meant nothing in this cruel world, as strength was the currency that reigned supreme. Max glowered at the three humans before him and snorted. Under the shocked gazes of the three humans, Max flapped his wings and left the lair. What was going on, the humans thought to themselves. Wasn't it going to fight us? Why is it running? Whoosh! Max sped out of the lair. He was not stupid. The narrow confines of his lair had placed his huge body at a great disadvantage against those humans. Moreover, none of them were pushovers. Should the three of them join forces, Max reckoned that he did not have much chance of winning. Moreover, Max had already enlisted Mia's assistance beforehand. As such, would he not be wasting his resources if he were to initiate a battle within the lair? System, did you record the stats of the other two humans just now? Yes, their stats have already been recorded. Would the host like to look at their stats? The mechanical voice of the system sounded in Max's mind. Show them to me. Let's see just how powerful these three individuals who are capable of withstanding the thunderous divine retribution are. Although thunderous divine retribution was an extremely powerful spell, one needed to have high spell strength stats to cast the spell. Moreover, as a result of its potency, it also necessitated a high consumption of mana to fully utilize the spell's destructive power. While Max was capable of using the powerful spell, the moment he had cast it, he could instantly feel at least 40% of his mana reserves being drained away. If used continuously, Max reckoned that he would be taken out of the fight earlier than he could defeat his opponents. Ding dong. Displaying the stats of the two other humans now. Two Azure attribute panels immediately appeared in front of Max. Name, Galio. Race, human. Current rank, platinum. Age, 50. Maximum lifespan, 88. Attack, 16 plus 22, normal human 12. Spell strength, 5 plus 39, normal human 3. Defense, 8 plus 30, normal human 5. Speed, 8 plus 30, normal human 8. Magic, poison trail, superglue, strengthening potion, berserk potion. Remarks, an alchemist who is capable of consuming most alchemy potions in this world. He will happily sacrifice his own body for the sake of alchemy. Max clicked his tongue. To think that Galio was an alchemist. Via the memories he had inherited, Max learned of how difficult the humans of this profession were to deal with. After all, they utilized all sorts of strange and disgusting potions to torture their opponents. They were such an annoyance to deal with that unless they had purposefully provoked the dragon, most dragons would just ignore them. Following this, Max then looked at the second human's stats, the one with gold hair and carried two giant greatswords. Name, Calcis Madrian Klaus. Race, human. Current rank, platinum 99%. Age, 29. Maximum lifespan, 223. Attack, 75, normal human 12. Spell strength, 63, normal human 3. Defense, 50, normal human 5. Speed, 61, normal human 8. Magic, Luminous Slash, Crusader Cross Slash, Divine Parting, Inglo's Gift. Remarks, a genius among geniuses. He is a human that is close to reaching the diamond rank prior to the age of 30. Moreover, his light magic and his swordsmanship has already reached the level of Grandmaster. I wonder just how many gifted individuals yearn the power he has. Is this human blessed by the heavens? Max mentally cursed upon reading Calce's stats. What kind of person, no, monster is this? Other than his spell strength, this human named Calces has me beat in all other aspects. Is he even human? Is he the actual dragon instead? Where did this monster come from? Had I not possessed the battle of existence, I would have already fled together with my sister. Although he was initially very surprised by Calce's stats panel, Max quickly calmed himself down. He spread out his two wings, and rushed towards the direction with the greatest density of human soldiers. He noticed that a dragon vanquishing ballista was slowly being adjusted, and it had its sights set on him. They brought a total of 3 dragon vanquishing ballistae. There were already 2 in the lair. Furthermore, the remnant lightning energy from thunderous divine retribution is not something that these ordinary soldiers can withstand. Thus, once I get rid of the 3rd dragon vanquishing ballista, Mia should be safe. With this thought in mind, Max directly rushed towards the direction of the final dragon vanquishing ballista. The final dragon vanquishing ballista was only about 2 kilometers away from Marx. At Max's top speeds, he was able to reach and destroy it in a blink of an eye. At the same time, the 3 humans in the lair had just made their way out. What they saw, however, had instantly caused their eyes to light up, as Max was rushing over to the direction of the dragon vanquishing ballista while throwing caution to the wind. Permission to fire. Let this red dragon have a taste of its own medicine. Galileo roared. Although they did not discover Agatha, Max, who was capable of unleashing such terrifying power at such a young age, had grabbed their attention fully. After all, if it was already able to display such strength despite being a dragon hatchling, would it not mean that it would grow up to become even more terrifying than Agatha? Therefore, they shifted their priority to killing Max instead. Sir Calces, do you think that the 3 heroes had fallen prey to this dragon hatchling? Felix frowned and asked. I highly doubt it. Even though the hatchling can unleash powerful magic, there's no way it could use it consecutively within a short period of time. The 3 heroes are experts in dealing with dragons. Moreover, they were also armed with a dragon vanquishing ballista, and they had the powerhouse that is Tahir. Unless they were wiped out together while off guard, there's no way they would be defeated by the dragon hatchling. Moreover, they were also in possession of the red dragon slayer. No red dragon would be able to resist the temptation of the massive ruby embedded in it. I think it's more likely that the dragon that killed the 3 heroes is observing us in the dark. Max was rapidly approaching the dragon vanquishing ballista. At this moment, the squad that was in charge of the ballista was none other than the Iron Maiden squad. The leader of the squad, Dorian, was aiming directly at Max's direction. Max showed no signs of dodging. Instead, he charged straight at the ballista without a care in the world. This red dragon is truly fearless. It dares underestimate the power of the dragon vanquishing ballista. Does the word death not exist in its vocabulary? Even if we were to miss its vitals, the penetrating power of the dragon vanquishing bolts would immediately take it out of battle. Indeed. Let us enjoy the despair of this red dragon that is about to lose its life. At this moment, several of the soldiers beside the Iron Maiden squad gloated happily. On the other hand, Dorian's forehead was drenched in sweat. Although the dragon vanquishing ballista was very powerful, its greatest downfall had always been aiming it properly. After all, a powerful weapon needed a worthy owner to realize its strength as well. Dorian took a deep breath as his heart thumped rapidly. Fortunately, the dragon was stupid and made no attempts to dodge the dragon vanquishing ballista. Otherwise, should he miss his first shot, it would also most likely be his last, as everyone in a 50-meter radius would perish to the dragon hatchling. Dorian glanced at the soldiers who were sneering at the dragon, and he cursed them 1,000 times in his heart. Do you know how hard it is to operate this contraption? If I miss here, not only will I die, but all of you guys as well. Even now, all of you still look like you're fooling around. Could it be that you're not here to fight, but to brag instead? At this moment, Max had already entered the range of the dragon-vanquishing ballista. At the same time, the three of generals who were rushing back were also clammy with sweat. Should the Iron Maiden squad fail here, the soldiers in the vicinity of the ballista would suffer heavy casualties. Calcis glanced at an extremely luxurious carriage not far away. Upon realizing that Max was still maintaining a safe distance from the carriage, he slowly let out a sigh of relief. He did not want the individual resting in the carriage to be disturbed in any way. After all, the individual residing within the carriage was their greatest trump card in this dragon-slaying crusade. Calcis had been ordered that unless absolutely necessary, the individual within the carriage must not be disturbed. Even if 80% of the lives on the scene were sacrificed, the individual must not be disturbed. Calcis knew very little about the person within the carriage. However, after following the old king for so many years, he knew not to doubt the serious expression in his eyes. Calcis was certain once the individual in the carriage made a move, it would definitely extol a heavy price. Either the kingdom would lose their connection to this individual once and for all, or the kingdom would need to pay a high cost in material goods. With the Great War only just recently resolved, the nation's resources were at their lowest point ever. There was no way Calcis would jeopardize the nation's rebuilding process all because of a dragon hatchling. At this moment, the distance between Max and the ballista was only a mere 500 meters. 400 meters. 300 meters. 200 meters. Max's extreme speed brought about a hurricane, and it instilled a heavy pressure on the surrounding soldiers. In comparison to the awe-inspiring Max, they felt as if they were insignificant specks of microorganisms. Max, on the other hand, was like a high and mighty god that held full authority over their fate. If Max was serious, he could instantly slaughter them where they stood. Roar. Max let out a deafening dragon roar. The soldiers present who did not cover their ears either went deaf or bled from their 7 orifices. That was just how powerful and debilitating Max's dragon roar was. Even though Dorian's heart was about to jump out, he still refused to fire. This was because even though Max was already close by, it was not a distance in which the bolt was guaranteed to land. On the other hand, once Max entered 100 meters within the dragon-vanquishing ballista's range, he was guaranteed to perish, as he would be struck with enough firepower to bring down even ancient dragons. Dorian had to endure it. Even if he had to pay the price with his life. In the distance, when Felix saw this scene, a hint of respect flashed in the depths of his eyes. This had nothing to do with strength or status. Instead, it was a soldier's highest respect for another soldier, who had chosen to sacrifice himself. 150 meters. 100 meters. At this moment, Max finally stepped into the dragon-vanquishing ballista's critical region. Once in the critical region, even ancient dragons would not be able to escape death. This was the crystallization of mankind's most advanced technology. Every single dragon-vanquishing ballista was an invention that had cost countless amount of blood and sweat to make. The raw materials required to craft the ballistae were made out of dragon body parts, after all. Behind Dorian, the other members of the Iron Maiden squad steeled their resolve, and worked together to loosen the safety lock of the ballista. Fire. Dorian no longer had to suppress the fear in his heart. His pupils had already shrunk to a small dot as he turned around and roared loudly. Ka-cha! The button to fire the ballista had been pressed at this moment. Creak! The sound of steel being compressed rang out from the dragon-vanquishing ballista. In the next moment, a massive jet-black bolt of death was fired outwards. Its target was Max's head. All the soldiers present held their breaths. They did not doubt the power of the dragon-vanquishing ballista. At such a close distance, they were certain that it would easily pierce through Max and instantly kill him. Even though everything had happened in a split second, to the onlookers, it felt like a year had just gone by. At this moment, a faint golden aura enveloped Max's body. It was a majestic, almost sacred aura. At the same time, the dragon-vanquishing bolt that the humans were so proud of struck the center of Max's head. Between his brows and behind the skull was Max's brain. Any weapon that destroyed Max's brain would definitely kill him on the spot. Despite the firepower contained within the bolt, it had no way of piercing Max's skull that was no thicker than a human fist. Kzzzzzzz. The ear-piercing sound of metal colliding against Max's skull rang out. Dong. However, at long last, only a bent dragon vanquishing bolt remained in front of Max. Max was completely unscathed. Hiss. Everyone present, including Calcis, Felix and Galio, gasped. Boom. Although it was still raining cats and dogs, the sound of the dragon vanquishing arrow crashing into the ground was still very audible. The entire battlefield was deathly quiet at this moment, bar the ambience of the rain. A moment later, someone finally reacted. With his fingers trembling hard, one of the soldiers pointed at Max and shouted, "How is this possible? The dragon vanquishing bolt is capable of piercing through the scales of ancient dragons. How can it be ineffective against a dragon hatchling? I saw it with my own eyes. I'm certain that the dragon vanquishing bolt had struck the red dragon's forehead." The man's voice was so loud that everyone on the battlefield, including Calcis, Felix, and Galio, had heard it clearly as well. At this point, everyone returned their senses like clockwork. At this moment, a hint of fear flashed in the depths of their eyes. Yes, only now did they finally feel fear. Previously they thought that with Calcis, Felix, Galio and the 3 dragon vanquishing ballistae at their side, they were certain they could take on anything that come their way. In their eyes, Max was only a lump of meat disguised as a red dragon. They were certain that even if Sir Calcis and the other 2 generals were to fail, the ballistae would easily clean up the situation. However, after realizing that the 100-strong group that had ventured into the lair had been reduced into 3 miserable generals, the soldiers finally understood. Before Max, they were no more than ants waiting to be squashed. They were powerless against Max. Dorian looked at the uninjured Marks in shock. He could not believe that all of this was real. Dorian's hometown had been destroyed by a dragon. Thus he sought revenge, and upon realizing that the dragon vanquishing ballista contained enough power to fulfill this wish of his, he decided to join the king's army. He wanted to witness the lofty dragons who treated everything else like ants fall into despair. He wanted to savor their fear, their terror, as they realized the power of the dragon vanquishing ballista. It was for this reason that he had worked arduously to become the captain of the Iron Maiden squad. After all, by attaining this rank, he would finally be able to operate and kill those filthy dragons with his very own hands. However, now that the dragon vanquishing ballista had failed to kill off a mere dragon hatchling, he began to wonder, have all my efforts over the years been in vain? Impossible, this is absolutely impossible. Dorian's pupils were trembling like crazy. His outlook on life and his personal values had all come crashing down at this moment. One had to know that ancient dragon-level existences were as rare and as mythical as phoenix feathers. More often than not, the dragons who lacked the aptitude would have already perished long before even becoming an old dragon. Only those who were the cream of the crop, rare genius-level existences, would manage to become ancient dragons and rule as the apex predator of the food chain. However, the dragon vanquishing bolt was supposed to be able to destroy ancient dragons. This shouldn't be possible. There's no way that this dragon hatchling that looks younger than 3 years old has already become an ancient dragon, right? If Max was truly an ancient dragon, then Max had no need to escape in the first place. After all, the strength owned by ancient dragons would allow him to turn the battleground into his hunting ground instead. Even a powerful existence like Calcis was no more than a delicious meal to ancient dragons. Run! It's going to eat us. Flee now, otherwise you might not return alive. Dad. Mom. Even though they were only facing a dragon hatchling, many of the soldiers had already lost their morale, and were trying to run for their lives. Worse still, the air was filled with the smell of feces and urine. Those pitiful cowards were actually scared to the point of peeing their pants, even though Max had done nothing yet to them. Max stared at Doral, who was standing beside the dragon vanquishing ballista in a daze. Sensing Max's gaze, Dorian's entire body trembled. Max's gaze made him feel as though he had fallen into an ice cellar in an instant. Immediately after, he reacted. While gritting his teeth, he looked at Max and roared furiously. "Damn dragon, I'm going to kill you." Dorian's eyes were already filled with bloodlust. There was a certain air of madness to him. His dream of many years had been destroyed by Max in a mere instant. What he did not realize, however, was that the only dragon who could block the dragon-vanquishing bolt was Max, and Max alone. The crazed Dorian pulled out a meter-long blade from his waist and rushed in Max's direction. Even though Max was only a dragon hatchling, killing an ordinary person like Dorian was still an easy task for him. On the other hand, Max did not plan to converse with this stranger who held such a huge grudge against him. Max was no longer a human. Now that he had transmigrated, he was a dragon. He was a mortal enemy of the human race, and unless one of the sides had gone extinct, their grudge will never end. Max chose the simplest and most violent method to dispose of Dorian. He grabbed him with his claw. The large claw enveloped Dorian, and he had no way to escape. Meanwhile, upon noticing this scene, Felix instantly flew into a rage. Dorian was a soldier that possessed outstanding talent. He refused to let him die in vain. "Stop, you despicable red dragon!" Oath of gold and stone. Felix smashed his staff against the ground. The huge recoil force directly sent Felix soaring into the sky, and into Max's direction. He sped as fast as a bullet. Had Felix not been so eager to save Dorian, he would not have used this method to speed ahead. After all, although he could cover large distances quickly, doing so had exposed himself completely to Max. However, Felix could not care any less. He wanted to save Dorian at any cost. "Kid, just you wait, I'm coming to save you. It's just a dragon hatchling, and I'm a sturdy shield, Felix." Felix shouted. Max and Dorian heard Felix's voice, and had finally noticed Felix's presence. Realizing that Felix was coming to save him, Dorian could not help but shed tears. As expected, I was right in choosing to be a soldier. Dorian even began to fantasize as to how Felix would provide him with plenty more opportunities to slay dragons once they had finally defeated this dragon hatchling. Dorian had a bright future ahead of him. Now he only needed to survive. Yes, he only needed to survive. Dorian's eyes lit up. The next moment, a crushing sound could be heard. Dorian, who had been grabbed by Marx, was crushed into a bloody pulp. Splat. A hint of confusion flashed across Felix's eyes. He watched helplessly as Dorian, who was less than a dozen meters away from him, was crushed into a bloody pulp. Felix gritted his teeth, and his eyes turned red with rage. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. He glared at Max viciously as his rage fueled him with strength. "Calm down, Felix. He's just a squad leader. If he dies, then so be it." Galio, who was still some distance away, cursed upon noticing Felix's exaggerated reaction. As far as Galio was concerned, it was extremely stupid to take such a risk for a mere squad leader. "Don't speak as if you know it all. You're a B***** whose mind is filled with only alchemy." Felix roared, but this did little to alleviate his anger. "In my opinion, he is much more important than you. Even if 100 of you or 1,000 of you were to be sacrificed, it would still not be as huge a loss as a brave soldier, full of fighting spirit, who's willing to give it their all for their nation. Vile dragon, I will make you realize what a foolish decision you have made." The water spirits that surrounded Felix began to fluctuate violently at this moment. Soon after, the water spirits formed waves upon waves of white mist. It was as if they had evaporated into water vapor. Following this, water droplets gradually appeared on Felix's incomparably firm muscles. However, just a moment later, a pillar of flame suddenly erupted from Felix's body. Boom! Fierce flames enveloped Felix's body at this moment. The death of his subordinate, combined with his guilt of being unable to said subordinate, had finally allowed Felix to realize the fury contained within the fire element. Ruthless, relentless, arrogance, and the desire to raise everything. The essence of the fire element was finally made known to Felix, and it had given him a massive power-up. Lines upon lines of flaming patterns appeared across his skin, and the power contained within those flaming patterns had even caused miniature explosions to ring out within the air. As he observed Felix's condition, Calcis, who was still some distance away, muttered to himself, "To think that you are able to evolve through your emotions during battle. Felix, you are truly a genius. You are one of the few individuals whose strength I have acknowledged. Should you survive this battle, Felix, perhaps I will recommend you to the mysterious big shot within the carriage." Meanwhile, Max was also very much surprised by Felix's sudden transformation. Ding dong. Detected that the human in front of the host, Felix's stats have begun to increase. Attack, spell strength, defense, and other attribute points have all increased by 10 points. Felix has also learned a new spell, Savage Flames, Fire Element Strike, Fireball, Fiery Fist. After listening to the system's explanation, Max frowned slightly. Why are all my opponents monsters? It feels like I'm about to get beaten up. After the explosive power-up that Felix had received, Max no longer intended to fight him head-on. Instead, he used his dragon breath to cause a huge explosion, and following this, he then launched into the air with a powerful flap of his wings. Trying to leave, vile dragon? It won't be that easy. I will make you pay for what you've done. Felix roared, and his eyes suddenly lit up. A scarlet light filled his eyes. Then, the flow of the air changed. It was as if Felix was the main character of the world at this moment. The air moved rapidly like a strong hurricane. An instant later, it had all gathered around Felix. Within Felix's hand, a blazingly bright orb rapidly began to form. Can you withstand this move of mine, dragon? Fiery Fist. Felix closed his mouth, and his right fist, which had already accumulated immense power, was launched straight towards the air. Rumble. A thunderous explosion rocked the air. Immediately after, a red fist that was dozens of meters wide appeared out of thin air. The vast amount of energy contained within the fist had shocked even Galileo, who was an expert pyrotechnic. Waves of powerful energy tore through the air, as if it was threatening to obliterate anything that came close to it. Moreover, the flaming fist was very fast. In less than 5 seconds, it had already closed the gap between itself and Max. When did this kid become so powerful? What on earth did he take? With this much power, he might even be able to make it into the diamond rank. Galileo subconsciously took a glance at Calcis. After all, throughout all this time, Calcis, who was extremely close to reaching the diamond rank, was the only one among the three of them who could unleash such a powerful attack. Max clicked his tongue. He refused to perish here. Acting quickly, Max then opened his mouth wide and began condensing electricity. Thunderous divine retribution. Boom. The two powerful energies instantly came into contact, and in an instant, a violent explosion ensued, scattering apart the thick ominous clouds covering the sky. The sky was clear. Stars dotted the sky, and it looked incomparably beautiful. Mia, who was hiding behind the clouds, was struck by the shockwaves from the explosion. Realizing that she was exposed, she hurriedly flapped her wings and hid among the scattered dark clouds. Fortunately, however, no one had noticed Mia. All eyes were trained on the situation unfolding on the field. Max's strength had already far exceeded everyone's expectations. Should Max survive the fiery fist and come out unscathed, then who else, other than the three leaders, was a match for the dragon hatchling? The soldiers could not help but think to themselves, just how monstrous would this hatchling be once it grows up? The seeds of hatred had already been planted. Once Max had fully matured and decided to take revenge, the humans of the future would undoubtedly pay a heavy price. This was a scene that the old king absolutely did not want to see. In order to prevent this from happening, no matter how great the price was, Max needed to die in this very battlefield. Sir Calcis, aren't we going to help? I think that with the three of us working together, this little dragon will definitely not be our match. Let's keep on observing. This little dragon has been giving me bad vibes ever since I saw it. After stopping Galio, Calcis continued, Felix won't fall so easily. Moreover, he's currently consumed by rage. Let's have him vent his frustrations. Boom. The terrifying explosion brought up countless grains of sand, causing countless soldiers to cough violently. The grains of sand that were blasted into the sky by the powerful impact blocked everyone's line of sight, making it impossible for most of the soldiers to open their eyes. As a result, they were unaware of what was transpiring on the battlefield. As the dust gradually dispersed, the situation on the field was finally made clear to all. The flames on Felix's body were still burning fiercely. The attack earlier did not seem to consume much of Felix's strength. On the other hand, Max did not seem to be holding up well. The backlash as a result of continuously unleashing thunderous divine retribution was not something Max could withstand at the moment. Moreover, as it had not been long since his last use of the thunderous divine retribution, his mana reserves were running low. Due to this, the power of his second thunderous divine retribution was greatly reduced. Right after deflecting the fiery fist, it immediately vanished. Max gulped. These guys are fierce. Felix alone had already given enough trouble to him. However, there were still two monsters who were standing by and watching. Max was certain that the moment he showed any weakness, the other two generals would immediately lunge at him. The circumstances that he was in this time was different from when he encountered the three heroes. Previously, Max was fortunate enough to pick them off one by one, but now, Max was facing against a 100,000-strong army. The only silver lining he had for him, however, was that Mia's position had not yet been exposed. Should he really be in a precarious spot, Max was certain that Mia would provide him support from the sky. However, there was also the issue of Mia's accuracy, which was horrendously awful. You're able to take on my fiery fist, not bad, dragon. How about 2, 3, no, 5 of them? Felix snorted coldly and glared at Max. Felix was extremely furious. Unless he was able to kill Max today, he would most likely be haunted by his failure throughout the rest of his life. The desire to launch yet another fiery first ignited within Felix's mind. However, why would Max fall for the same trick again? Through the assistance of the system, Max had already figured out the weakness of the fiery fist. Although the fiery fist was extremely powerful, did not consume much energy, and could be released many times within a short period, its greatest weakness was that it had limited range. Once the distance between the caster and its target exceeded 100 meters, the power of the fiery fist would be greatly reduced. Do you really think that I'm that big of an idiot that I would attack you head-on here? Max mentally spat as he prepared to leave. Although I can't match your strength currently, I should be able to take down your subordinates, right? No matter how powerful you are, as a red dragon, my speed far surpasses yours. If Max had truly wanted to escape, unless the humans had prepared a trap beforehand, no one would be able to stop him. Naturally, no other dragon would share the same thoughts as Max. In their view, the humans, those puny impudent ants, had insulted the dragons, and as such they must pay the price. Even if the dragons were no match for the humans, escaping would be the last thing on those dragons' minds. This guy is trying to escape. Hurry up and stop him. Felix had read Max's intentions clearly, and thus, he quickly shouted to Galio in the distance. I know. A pained expression flashed across Galio's eyes, but his actions were still very nimble. With his appearance still that of a savage monster, Galio extended his massive hand into his small satchel, and brought out a red potion. It was a rather comical sight. Galio pulled out the wooden stopper of the red potion. Immediately after, a strange fog was emitted from the tube. An illusion. It was a trap created by the master alchemist Galio for the purpose of hunting dragons. There was a lot of gemstone powder mixed in it, and thus, creating the trap had cost a pretty penny. It was no wonder that Galio was so hesitant to use it. The scarlet mist spread quickly, and everywhere it went, a bright sparkle was emitted. It was in the middle of the night, and the sparkles had made it seem as if there were various precious gemstones scattered everywhere. If an ordinary dragon were to spot so many gemstones in open air, they would most likely fall into a trance, regardless of their current state of combat. After all, in the eyes of dragons, these shiny gemstones were worth more than their lives. They would rather die than to lose treasure. Dragon, do you still think that you are the rulers of the world? You can't even resist the temptation of treasures, even if you know that this is a trap. You can't escape. We have already set up an inescapable net around your lair. You will always be enslaved by your nature, and you will never be able to leave this place. Galio looked at the red fog that had already surrounded Max. He could not help but laugh out loud as he spoke in Max's direction. Many soldiers became excited when they heard Galio's voice. That's right. No matter how powerful a dragon was, they're ultimately still beasts. Bogged down by their greed, there is not a single dragon that can resist the temptation of treasures. Even if they knew that they were walking into a trap, dragons were still unable to resist. Due to this greedy nature of theirs, the intelligent humans, while weak, were still able to defeat the strong dragons. Max was certain that Agatha would fall for this illusion. The problem with this, however, was that Max was no normal dragon. He was a transmigrator. He was a human in his previous life, and thus, Max did not share his brethren's love for treasure. He had already defeated Rafik, a warrior who relied on the red dragon's love of rubies to beat his enemies, and now, Galio was attempting the same trick again. You wish to trap me in this illusion of jewels. You're delusional. Max snorted coldly, completely ignoring the sparkles around him. With a flap of his wings, he immediately took to the skies. How is this possible? Why is this guy not affected by the array of jewels? I don't believe it. How can there be a dragon who's capable of resisting the array? Could something have gone wrong with my reagent? Galio stared wide-eyed at Max. He was completely dumbfounded. Get ready to move. Should this red dragon escape, our operation will be considered a failure. Calcis looked at Max, who was already in the air, and stated coldly. His two great swords were already in his hands. As he spoke, all sorts of complicated patterns began to light up on the claymores. A razor-sharp sword aura, with Calcius as the center, was unleashed. This sudden burst of the sword aura instantly stirred up a strong hurricane. As a result of the sharp sword aura, Galio, who was standing beside Calcis, had his hair flutter violently. In fact, there were even quite a number of strands which had been sliced off due to Calcis' sword aura. That's terrifying. How far has Lord Calcis pursued the path of the sword? While looking at his hair that had been cut off by Calcis' sword aura, Galio could feel his heart begin to palpitate. The gaze he used to look at Calcis had also become much more solemn. Prior to submitting to the old king, Galio was an enemy of Calcis. Had he not surrendered and quickly submitted himself, there would likely be a huge battle between Calcis and himself. Galio asked himself, why on earth did I think I was on equal footing with this monster back then? The power he displayed from a casual swing has already Felix's fiery fist. Had we really fought last time, he would have used an even more intense ability, right? Naturally, Calcis was unaware of what Galio was thinking at this moment. His attention was solely devoted to preventing Max from escaping the area. As for why Max was unaffected by Galio's jewel array, Calcis had chalked it up to Galio messing it up. It was for this reason that Max had resisted its temptation. Galio, I will discuss the matter of you messing up the array of jewels once we return. After speaking those words, Calcis' figure suddenly vanished. All that remained was a fleeting mirage. Calcis was so fast that it made one's hair stand on end. Sir Calcis, I can still catch it. You need not make a move. Sensing the sword aura that was unleashed some distance away, Felix immediately realized that Calcis had made a move. You have already lost when that fiery fist failed to kill the red dragon in an instant. Calcis' voice suddenly rang out from beside Felix's ear. However, when he turned around, Felix did not see any signs of the commander. Countless cross symbols appeared in the sky at this moment. A figure was continuously using these cross symbols as a springboard to quickly pursue Max. "It's over, little dragon." Calcius' voice appeared in front of Max in less than 10 seconds. Calcius' appearance had indeed given Max a fright. After all, how did a human who was unable to fly appear in front of him? He was 600 meters in the air. Even the dragon vanquishing arrow was unable to reach him at this height. The next instant, a glint of cold steel suddenly swept at Max from his side. Screech! Max's dragon scales unexpectedly let out an ear-piercing sound of metal colliding against it. Soon after, his scales split open and Calcius' greatswords had inflicted a great deal of damage to his sides. Max was shocked at his injury. Calcius' figure slowly approached Max. Calcius looked down at Max as if he was already looking at a dead object. "Surrender here, and perhaps I'll make your death painless." Crackle! Magic, thunderclap! A bolt of lightning suddenly exploded in front of Calcius. It had struck Calcius precisely. However, Calcius seemed to have anticipated the lightning. He lifted his right hand that was holding onto a greatsword to the sky and deflected Max's attack. Calcius' eyes twitched, and while squinting at Max, he said slowly, "My name is Calcius Madeline Curus. I am the successor of light and sword magic. Everything will return to nothingness. Everything will be meaningless. Everything will be destroyed. Everything will return to the embrace of light. Little dragon, let me give you a taste of real magic." Divine parting. Calcius' voice suddenly resounded through the world as the environment around Max vanished into nothingness. All that was left was a blinding light. The light that was initially warm gradually heated up, and before long, it had become extremely hot. In the next moment, a huge light sword formed in the sky. It was like the sword of Damocles that judged the sins of the world. Max was suddenly overwhelmed with a great sense of danger. This was the biggest threat he had faced apart from being in the egg ever since he transmigrated. His usually calm heart began to thump violently. At this moment, Max could already feel the call of the goddess of death. Ding dong. The host is facing a huge threat. Host Max, the human, Calcius, has unleashed the magic divine parting on you. The system has determined that based on the host's current physique, taking on this attack would result in an immediate loss. In the face of such a situation, please make your choice. 1. Puny human, do you really think that you can hurt me with this spell? No way. No way. Ignore the attack from the human, Calcius. Reward, increase the probability of death by 1000%. Acquire skill, language of death, dark sacrifice. Immediately after death, transfer all of the host's strength to the host's sister, Mia. 2. I can easily intercept this attack with my lightning breath. I don't even need the system's help for this. Counter Calcius' spell with your own ability. Increases the probability of death by 500%. Reward, obtain language of death, undead calamity, immediately transform into an ancient undead dragon. Choosing this will result in the disgust of the mother goddess, Tiamat. 3. Tahiricide, this is the strongest human enemy I have ever faced. Face up to your own weakness, and make use of all possible opportunities around you to survive. Reward, invincible golden body enhancement, can be used 3 times in a row, but after each use, the cooldown time of the skill will be greatly extended. Max quickly skimmed through the system's options and chose the third option without an ounce of hesitation. System, I choose the third option. Beep. 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 The host has chosen the third option. The host has admitted to his own weakness. By owning up and confronting his own weakness, he has gained true strength. Distributing reward. The reward has been successfully distributed. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the invincible golden body plus. The mechanical voice in his mind disappeared, and what followed was the interface of the enhanced invincible golden body appearing before him. True name, Max Agatha Hill Alexander. Race, Red Dragon, Lawful Evil. Current Dragon Rank, Dragon Hatchling. Age, 1. Maximum Lifespan, 12,000, Ancient Dragon. Attack, 31, Normal Red Dragon Hatchling 15. Spell Strength, 505, Normal Red Dragon Hatchling 25. Defense, 21, Normal Red Dragon Hatchling 10. Speed, 30, Normal Red Dragon Hatchling 13. Spells, Invincible Golden Body Plus, Lightning Arrow Rain, Thunderstorm, Lightning Paralysis, Thunderclap, Light Affinity, Lightning Immunity, Thunderous Divine Retribution, 10 million volts of thunder. Abilities, Bite, Claw Strike, Stomp, Tail Swipe. Breath, Lightning, Strong Acid. Remarks, you've amassed such a wide assortment of disgusting abilities. Can you make it any more obvious you're using cheats? Invincible Golden Body Plus. When used on the host will be immune to all attacks beneath the level of the Dragon God for 3 seconds. The host is able to cast this spell 3 times in a row, and on the second consecutive case, the invincibility duration would be halved. On the third consecutive cast, the duration would be further halved. On first use, the cooldown time will be 24 hours. When used while the first instance is still on cooldown, the cooldown time of both instances will be increased to 48 hours. When used while the first 2 instances are on cooldown, the cooldown time of all 3 instances will be increased to 72 hours. When used on allies, the targets will be immune for 0.25 seconds. When targeted, the spell cannot be used consecutively. Once used on allies, Invincible Golden Body will immediately enter cooldown. As he read through Invincible Golden Body Plus' description, a crafty glint flashed across Max's eyes. I bet you won't expect this, Calcis. Max raised his head and looked at the sword of light hovering above his head. Although dangerous before, now that Max had gained Invincible Golden Body Plus, it was no longer a threat to Max. So long as he was not facing someone who was of the Dragon God rank, all attacks would be useless against him. Naturally, Max also realized that there were limits to the Invincible Golden Body Plus. Those who understood the nature of his skill would only need to launch continuous attacks at him. By doing so, it would make it impossible for Max to dodge all of the blows. However, would Calcis realize that Max was in possession of such a powerful ability? The sword of light in the air had accumulated enough energy. At this moment, it was shining like the sun. The light it radiated was so intense that even those who were 1,000 miles away could spot it. The originally dark sky had turned white as day due to the intense light. Countless soldiers gasped in shock. Although the sword was a good distance away from them, they were still able to sense just how terrifying the energy contained within the sword was. Moreover, the fact that it had turned night into daytime was nothing short of a miracle to them. While they were aware that Calcis was extremely powerful, they did not expect it to reach such an extent. Such power was worthy of reverence. Felix was stunned, and so too was Galio. The 100,000 soldiers present were stupefied by the brilliant sword illuminating the sky. Humans had been worshipping power ever since the dawn of time, and the power that Calcis had displayed was downright terrifying. His display of strength had once again reminded the soldiers that Calcis was one of the major factors in the previous Great War to unify the continent. However, even back then, Calcis had never used such a powerful ability. Was Calcis holding back? Upon this thought, the respect of the soldiers towards Calcis had reached an all-new high. This power. It's so overwhelming that it has even intimidated the anger within my heart. Felix stared wide-eyed at the shining light in the sky. A strong gust of wind was blowing against his clothes, but even when the sand entered his eyes, he was completely unfazed. Felix was furious over Dorian's death. However, the sheer power contained within Calcis' light and sword magic had stilled the flames of rage within Felix's heart. On the other hand, Galio was thanking his lucky stars over the wise choice he had made back in the past. Had he actually gone ahead and fought against Calcis back then, he was certain that he would not have lasted for more than half a minute. Not only that, he might have also been sliced into mincemeat by Chalcis' overbearing swordsmanship. The choice I made was definitely the right one. With this much power, even a powerful dragon like Agatha would undoubtedly fall to him. Needless to say, this is more than enough power to slay this puny dragon hatchling. Buzz. Light flashed. That massive sword of light descended from the sky, as if the gods were delivering judgment to the evil dragon hatchling. Divine parting. The earth quaked and the sky split apart. Is this really an attack that a human can unleash? This is too terrifying. As expected of Sir Chalcis. It must be the will of the gods. Sir Chalcis must be an apostle of the gods to save the human world from the wrath of the evil dragons. The crowd discussed animatedly. The eyes of countless people flickered with excitement. A confused voice rang out from within the luxurious carriage not far away. The person within seemed to have been caught off guard by Chalcis' powerful attack. The light only lasted for a moment. However, that incomparably powerful strength still remained in the memories of everyone present. It was so powerful, so terrifying, and so undefeatable. Today was destined to be a day that everyone present would never forget. However, in the next moment, everyone was dumbfounded. They simply could not believe what they were seeing. Max was unscathed. That terrifying move just now did not cause any harm to Max at all. Chalcis was also stunned at this moment. A dazed expression flashed across his eyes. He looked at Max in disbelief and muttered. How is this possible? The old king put down the letter and said slowly. I, Alfred Graves, hereby declare to all lords of this nation. Assemble your forces, we are going to war. Upon hearing the old king's words, and after recovering from the shock, the guard beside him nodded solemnly. Even though the old king had managed to unify the entire continent, most city-states had yet to recover from the previous Great War. As such, the guard's surprise was to be expected. However, after giving it some more thought, the guard soon understood. The shrewd old king was truly above the common rank and file like the guard. Even without external factors slowing down the nation's recovery, it would still take over decades for the continent to return to its former glory prior to the Great War of the past. By then, would the old king still be alive? Even if Lil Tess were to inherit the throne and succeed the old king as the queen of the continent, would her father, who would then be in the heavens, rest easy? No, of course not. So long as the danger capable of wiping out the heroes remained, the old king could not rest, even in death. Therefore, the ensuing battle against the unknown dragon would not only serve to resolve the crisis plaguing Longsong Alley, the copper mine of the nation, it would also serve to hasten the nation's recovery to its former glory. The body of a dragon was like a giant treasure trove, after all. As long as they could defeat the ancient dragon that rivaled Agatha in strength, the rewards they would reap would be astronomical. Moreover, should the humans manage to defeat an ancient dragon by banding together, the dragon race's opinion towards the human race would likely increase. Hopefully, it would cause dragons to think twice before sieging any of the human settlements. Additionally, as a show of respect to the old king, little Tess would likely gain the unanimous support of the lords of the nation to succeed her father as the ruler of the nation. The guard could not help but be extremely excited upon this line of thought. He was happy that he had managed to grasp the old king's thought process, even if it was only slightly. He hurriedly ran out of the door with the intention of informing the ministers and the lords of the king's decision. In less than 3 days, the old king, Alfred Graves' decision to launch a crusade against an unknown dragon in the north had spread throughout the nation. As expected, the country had gone into an uproar. Some agreed with the king's decision. The faction was mostly composed of those who were previously victims of dragons. They no longer wanted to live in fear of dragons, and had they possessed the necessary strength in the first place, they would have already launched their own crusade against dragons. I support His Majesty's decision. So long as the mystery dragon in the north remains, our country will never experience true peace. Everyone, do you still wish to be oppressed by the dragons? Do you want to continue living under the fear of the dragons? Do you want to remain cowardly for the rest of your lives? However, there were also those who opposed the old king. This faction composed of those who had lost family, power, money, or other precious belongings in the previous Great War. They had no desire to lose anything else. If you want to die, then die alone. Don't bring us along. War will bring no benefit to us. Only death and destruction awaits us should His Majesty proceed with this plan. I have already lost my children and husband in the previous war. It's easy for those of you who avoided any losses to agree to this plan. How heartless. Should this crusade take place, the taxes that we'll have to pay would undoubtedly increase. Our harvest is decreasing every year, and we're facing a nationwide food shortage. Where on earth will we obtain the resources for this crusade? Despite the complaints, the lords of the nation had obediently complied with the old king's decision, and they had provided the old king with the resources required for his campaign. After all, the continent had already been unified. Dragons aside, the king's authority was second to none. Should the old king's ire be stoked, it would not be an understatement to say that millions of corpses would ensue. Alfred Graves' anger was not something they took lightly. As such, the preparation of the Grand Crusade against the mighty and mysterious Dragon of the North was in full swing. While all this was happening, Max was slumbering peacefully in his cave. He was completely oblivious to the events taking place in the human world. The next day, by the time Max had woken up, the sun was already hanging high above his head. After stretching his muscles and bones, Max felt that the muscles and veins in his body had once again strengthened. As expected, reincarnating into a dragon comes with many perks. All it takes to grow stronger is a simple sleep. System, show me my current stats. Ding. Loading stats interface. True name, Max Agatha Hill Alexander. Race, Red Dragon, Lawful Evil. Current rank, Hatchling. Age, 1. Maximum lifespan, 12,000, Ancient Dragon. Attack, 31, Normal Red Dragon Hatchling 15. Spell Strength, 505, Normal Red Dragon Hatchling 25. Defense, 21, Normal Red Dragon Hatchling 10. Speed, 30, Normal Red Dragon Hatchling 13. Spells, Lightning Arrow Rain, Thunderstorm, Lightning Paralysis, Thunderclap, Light Affinity, Lightning Immunity, Thunderous Divine Retribution, 10 million volts of thunder. Abilities, Bite, Claw Strike, Stomp, Tail Swipe. Breath, Lightning, Strong Acid. Remarks, should any other dragon hatchling possess the same stats as you, this world would undoubtedly be ruled by the dragons. As expected, I've become stronger. Although his improvement was not as great as devouring the black dragon or Tahir, it was still decent. Max was not greedy. He was very satisfied with his speed of growth. However, Max's attention was quickly pulled away from the interface. A sad series of wails had grabbed his attention. Max turned around and spotted his sister, Mia. She seemed to be having a nightmare. Tears rolled down the corner of her eyes, and she seemed to be choking on her tears. It was truly a pitiful sight. Max sighed helplessly. It seemed that the departure of their mother, Agatha, had dealt a great blow to Mia. Max was not as cold and heartless as Agatha. He was an existence who had transmigrated, after all. Although his personality had begun to subtly change towards that of a dragon, as his only remaining family member, Max cherished her greatly. He needed to pull Mia out of her depression. The old king put down the letter and said slowly, I, Alfred Graves, hereby declare to all lords of this nation. Assemble your forces, we are going to war. Upon hearing the old king's words, and after recovering from the shock, the guard beside him nodded solemnly. Even though the old king had managed to unify the entire continent, most city-states had yet to recover from the previous Great War. As such, the guard's surprise was to be expected. However, after giving it some more thought, the guard soon understood. The shrewd old king was truly above the common rank and file like the guard. Even without external factors slowing down the nation's recovery, it would still take over decades for the continent to return to its former glory prior to the Great War of the past. By then, would the old king still be alive? Even if Lil Tess were to inherit the throne and succeed the old king as the queen of the continent, would her father, who would then be in the heavens, rest easy? No, of course not. So long as the danger capable of wiping out the heroes remained, the old king could not rest, even in death. Therefore, the ensuing battle against the unknown dragon would not only serve to resolve the crisis plaguing Longsong Alley, the copper mine of the nation, it would also serve to hasten the nation's recovery to its former glory. The body of a dragon was like a giant treasure trove, after all. As long as they could defeat the ancient dragon that rivaled Agatha in strength, the rewards they would reap would be astronomical. Moreover, should the humans manage to defeat an ancient dragon by banding together, the dragon race's opinion towards the human race would likely increase. Hopefully, it would cause dragons to think twice before sieging any of the human settlements. Additionally, as a show of respect to the old king, little Tess would likely gain the unanimous support of the lords of the nation to succeed her father as the ruler of the nation. The guard could not help but be extremely excited upon this line of thought. He was happy that he had managed to grasp the old king's thought process, even if it was only slightly. He hurriedly ran out of the door with the intention of informing the ministers and the lords of the king's decision. In less than 3 days, the old king, Alfred Graves' decision to launch a crusade against an unknown dragon in the north had spread throughout the nation. As expected, the country had gone into an uproar. Some agreed with the king's decision. The faction was mostly composed of those who were previously victims of dragons. They no longer wanted to live in fear of dragons, and had they possessed the necessary strength in the first place, they would have already launched their own crusade against dragons. I support His Majesty's decision. So long as the mystery dragon in the north remains, our country will never experience true peace. Everyone, do you still wish to be oppressed by the dragons? Do you want to continue living under the fear of the dragons? Do you want to remain cowardly for the rest of your lives? However, there were also those who opposed the old king. This faction composed of those who had lost family, power, money, or other precious belongings in the previous Great War. They had no desire to lose anything else. If you want to die, then die alone. Don't bring us along. War will bring no benefit to us. Only death and destruction awaits us should His Majesty proceed with this plan. I have already lost my children and husband in the previous war. It's easy for those of you who avoided any losses to agree to this plan. How heartless. Should this crusade take place, the taxes that we'll have to pay would undoubtedly increase. Our harvest is decreasing every year, and we're facing a nationwide food shortage. Where on earth will we obtain the resources for this crusade? Despite the complaints, the lords of the nation had obediently complied with the old king's decision, and they had provided the old king with the resources required for his campaign. After all, the continent had already been unified. Dragons aside, the king's authority was second to none. Should the old king's ire be stoked, it would not be an understatement to say that millions of corpses would ensue. Alfred Graves' anger was not something they took lightly. As such, the preparation of the Grand Crusade against the mighty and mysterious dragon of the north was in full swing. While all this was happening, Max was slumbering peacefully in his cave. He was completely oblivious to the events taking place in the human world. The next day. By the time Max had woken up, the sun was already hanging high above his head. After stretching his muscles and bones, Max felt that the muscles and veins in his body had once again strengthened. As expected, reincarnating into a dragon comes with many perks. All it takes to grow stronger is a simple sleep. System, show me my current stats. Ding. Loading stats interface. True name, Max Agatha Hill Alexander. Race, Red Dragon, Lawful Evil. Current rank, Hatchling. Age, 1. Maximum lifespan, 12,000, Ancient Dragon. Attack, 31, Normal Red Dragon Hatchling 15. Spell Strength, 505, Normal Red Dragon Hatchling 25. Defense, 21, normal red dragon hatchling 10. Speed, 30, normal red dragon hatchling 13. Spells, lightning arrow rain, thunderstorm, lightning paralysis, thunderclap, light affinity, lightning immunity, thunderous divine retribution, 10 million volts of thunder. Abilities, bite, claw strike, stomp, tail swipe. Breath, lightning, strong acid. Remarks, should any other dragon hatchling possess the same stats as you, this world would undoubtedly be ruled by the dragons. As expected, I've become stronger. Although his improvement was not as great as devouring the black dragon or Tahir, it was still decent. Max was not greedy. He was very satisfied with his speed of growth. However, Max's attention was quickly pulled away from the interface. A sad series of wails had grabbed his attention. Max turned around and spotted his sister, Mia. She seemed to be having a nightmare. Tears rolled down the corner of her eyes, and she seemed to be choking on her tears. It was truly a pitiful sight. Max sighed helplessly. It seemed that the departure of their mother, Agatha, had dealt a great blow to Mia. Max was not as cold and heartless as Agatha. He was an existence who had transmigrated, after all. Although his personality had begun to subtly change towards that of a dragon, as his only remaining family member, Max cherished her greatly. He needed to pull Mia out of her depression. The old king put down the letter and said slowly, I, Alfred Graves, hereby declare to all lords of this nation. Assemble your forces, we are going to war. Upon hearing the old king's words, and after recovering from the shock, the guard beside him nodded solemnly. Even though the old king had managed to unify the entire continent, most city-states had yet to recover from the previous Great War. As such, the guard's surprise was to be expected. However, after giving it some more thought, the guard soon understood. The shrewd old king was truly above the common rank and file like the guard. Even without external factors slowing down the nation's recovery, it would still take over decades for the continent to return to its former glory prior to the Great War of the past. By then, would the old king still be alive? Even if Lil Tess were to inherit the throne and succeed the old king as the queen of the continent, would her father, who would then be in the heavens, rest easy? No, of course not. So long as the danger capable of wiping out the heroes remained, the old king could not rest, even in death. Therefore, the ensuing battle against the unknown dragon would not only serve to resolve the crisis plaguing Longsong Alley, the copper mine of the nation, it would also serve to hasten the nation's recovery to its former glory. The body of a dragon was like a giant treasure trove, after all. As long as they could defeat the ancient dragon that rivaled Agatha in strength, the rewards they would reap would be astronomical. Moreover, should the humans manage to defeat an ancient dragon by banding together, the dragon race's opinion towards the human race would likely increase. Hopefully, it would cause dragons to think twice before sieging any of the human settlements. Additionally, as a show of respect to the old king, little Tess would likely gain the unanimous support of the lords of the nation to succeed her father as the ruler of the nation. The guard could not help but be extremely excited upon this line of thought. He was happy that he had managed to grasp the old king's thought process, even if it was only slightly. He hurriedly ran out of the door with the intention of informing the ministers and the lords of the king's decision. In less than 3 days, the old king, Alfred Graves' decision to launch a crusade against an unknown dragon in the north had spread throughout the nation. As expected, the country had gone into an uproar. Some agreed with the king's decision. The faction was mostly composed of those who were previously victims of dragons. They no longer wanted to live in fear of dragons, and had they possessed the necessary strength in the first place, they would have already launched their own crusade against dragons. I support His Majesty's decision. So long as the mystery dragon in the north remains, our country will never experience true peace. Everyone, do you still wish to be oppressed by the dragons? Do you want to continue living under the fear of the dragons? Do you want to remain cowardly for the rest of your lives? However, there were also those who opposed the old king. This faction composed of those who had lost family, power, money, or other precious belongings in the previous Great War. They had no desire to lose anything else. If you want to die, then die alone. Don't bring us along. War will bring no benefit to us. Only death and destruction awaits us should His Majesty proceed with this plan. I have already lost my children and husband in the previous war. It's easy for those of you who avoided any losses to agree to this plan. How heartless. Should this crusade take place, the taxes that we'll have to pay would undoubtedly increase. Our harvest is decreasing every year, and we're facing a nationwide food shortage. Where on earth will we obtain the resources for this crusade? Despite the complaints, the lords of the nation had obediently complied with the old king's decision, and they had provided the old king with the resources required for his campaign. After all, the continent had already been unified. Dragons aside, the king's authority was second to none. Should the old king's ire be stoked, it would not be an understatement to say that millions of corpses would ensue. Alfred Graves' anger was not something they took lightly. As such, the preparation of the Grand Crusade against the mighty and mysterious Dragon of the North was in full swing. While all this was happening, Max was slumbering peacefully in his cave. He was completely oblivious to the events taking place in the human world. The next day, by the time Max had woken up, the sun was already hanging high above his head. After stretching his muscles and bones, Max felt that the muscles and veins in his body had once again strengthened. As expected, reincarnating into a dragon comes with many perks. All it takes to grow stronger is a simple sleep. System, show me my current stats. Ding. Loading stats interface. True name, Max Agatha Hill Alexander. Race, Red Dragon, Lawful Evil. Current rank, Hatchling. Age, 1. Maximum lifespan, 12,000, Ancient Dragon. Attack, 31, Normal Red Dragon Hatchling 15. Spell Strength, 505, Normal Red Dragon Hatchling 25. Defense, 21, Normal Red Dragon Hatchling 10. Speed, 30, Normal Red Dragon Hatchling 13. Spells, Lightning Arrow Rain, Thunderstorm, Lightning Paralysis, Thunderclap, Light Affinity, Lightning Immunity, Thunderous Divine Retribution, 10 million volts of thunder. Abilities, Bite, Claw Strike, Stomp, Tail Swipe. Breath, Lightning, Strong Acid. Remarks, should any other dragon hatchling possess the same stats as you, this world would undoubtedly be ruled by the dragons. As expected, I've become stronger. Although his improvement was not as great as devouring the black dragon or Tahir, it was still decent. Max was not greedy. He was very satisfied with his speed of growth. However, Max's attention was quickly pulled away from the interface. A sad series of wails had grabbed his attention. Max turned around and spotted his sister, Mia. She seemed to be having a nightmare. Tears rolled down the corner of her eyes, and she seemed to be choking on her tears. It was truly a pitiful sight. Max sighed helplessly. It seemed that the departure of their mother, Agatha, had dealt a great blow to Mia. Max was not as cold and heartless as Agatha. He was an existence who had transmigrated, after all. Although his personality had begun to subtly change towards that of a dragon, as his only remaining family member, Max cherished her greatly. He needed to pull Mia out of her depression. The old king put down the letter and said slowly, I, Alfred Graves, hereby declare to all lords of this nation. Assemble your forces, we are going to war. Upon hearing the old king's words, and after recovering from the shock, the guard beside him nodded solemnly. Even though the old king had managed to unify the entire continent, most city-states had yet to recover from the previous Great War. As such, the guard's surprise was to be expected. However, after giving it some more thought, the guard soon understood. The shrewd old king was truly above the common rank and file like the guard. Even without external factors slowing down the nation's recovery, it would still take over decades for the continent to return to its former glory prior to the Great War of the past. By then, would the old king still be alive? Even if Lil Tess were to inherit the throne and succeed the old king as the queen of the continent, would her father, who would then be in the heavens, rest easy? No, of course not. So long as the danger capable of wiping out the heroes remained, the old king could not rest, even in death. Therefore the ensuing battle against the unknown dragon would not only serve to resolve the crisis plaguing Longsong Alley, the copper mine of the nation, it would also serve to hasten the nation's recovery to its former glory. The body of a dragon was like a giant treasure trove, after all. As long as they could defeat the ancient dragon that rivaled Agatha in strength, the rewards they would reap would be astronomical. Moreover, should the humans manage to defeat an ancient dragon by banding together, the dragon race's opinion towards the human race would likely increase. Hopefully, it would cause dragons to think twice before sieging any of the human settlements. Additionally, as a show of respect to the old king, little Tess would likely gain the unanimous support of the lords of the nation to succeed her father as the ruler of the nation. The guard could not help but be extremely excited upon this line of thought. He was happy that he had managed to grasp the old king's thought process, even if it was only slightly. He hurriedly ran out of the door with the intention of informing the ministers and the lords of the king's decision. In less than 3 days, the old king, Alfred Graves' decision to launch a crusade against an unknown dragon in the north had spread throughout the nation. As expected, the country had gone into an uproar. Some agreed with the king's decision. The faction was mostly composed of those who were previously victims of dragons. They no longer wanted to live in fear of dragons, and had they possessed the necessary strength in the first place, they would have already launched their own crusade against dragons. I support His Majesty's decision. So long as the mystery dragon in the north remains, our country will never experience true peace. Everyone, do you still wish to be oppressed by the dragons? Do you want to continue living under the fear of the dragons? Do you want to remain cowardly for the rest of your lives? However, there were also those who opposed the old king. This faction composed of those who had lost family, power, money, or other precious belongings in the previous Great War. They had no desire to lose anything else. If you want to die, then die alone. Don't bring us along. War will bring no benefit to us. Only death and destruction awaits us should His Majesty proceed with this plan. I have already lost my children and husband in the previous war. It's easy for those of you who avoided any losses to agree to this plan. How heartless. Should this crusade take place, the taxes that we'll have to pay would undoubtedly increase. Our harvest is decreasing every year, and we're facing a nationwide food shortage. Where on earth will we obtain the resources for this crusade? Despite the complaints, the lords of the nation had obediently complied with the old king's decision, and they had provided the old king with the resources required for his campaign. After all, the continent had already been unified. Dragons aside, the king's authority was second to none. Should the old king's ire be stoked, it would not be an understatement to say that millions of corpses would ensue. Alfred Graves' anger was not something they took lightly. As such, the preparation of the Grand Crusade against the mighty and mysterious dragon of the north was in full swing. While all this was happening, Max was slumbering peacefully in his cave. He was completely oblivious to the events taking place in the human world. The next day, by the time Max had woken up, the sun was already hanging high above his head. After stretching his muscles and bones, Max felt that the muscles and veins in his body had once again strengthened. As expected, reincarnating into a dragon comes with many perks. All it takes to grow stronger is a simple sleep. System, show me my current stats. Ding. Loading stats interface. True name, Max Agatha Hill Alexander. Race, Red Dragon, Lawful Evil. Current rank, Hatchling. Age, 1. Maximum lifespan, 12,000, Ancient Dragon. Attack, 31, Normal Red Dragon Hatchling 15. Spell Strength, 505, Normal Red Dragon Hatchling 25. Defense, 21, Normal Red Dragon Hatchling 10. Speed, 30, Normal Red Dragon Hatchling 13. Spells: lightning arrow rain, thunderstorm, lightning paralysis, thunderclap, light affinity, lightning immunity, thunderous divine retribution, 10 million volts of thunder. Abilities: bite, claw strike, stomp, tail swipe. Breath: lightning, strong acid. Remarks: should any other dragon hatchling possess the same stats as you, this world would undoubtedly be ruled by the dragons. As expected, I've become stronger. Although his improvement was not as great as devouring the black dragon or Tahir, it was still decent. Max was not greedy. He was very satisfied with his speed of growth. However, Max's attention was quickly pulled away from the interface. A sad series of wails had grabbed his attention. Max turned around and spotted his sister, Mia. She seemed to be having a nightmare. Tears rolled down the corner of her eyes, and she seemed to be choking on her tears. It was truly a pitiful sight. Max sighed helplessly. It seemed that the departure of their mother, Agatha, had dealt a great blow to Mia. Max was not as cold and heartless as Agatha. He was an existence who had transmigrated, after all. Although his personality had begun to subtly change towards that of a dragon, as his only remaining family member, Max cherished her greatly. He needed to pull Mia out of her depression. The old king put down the letter and said slowly, I, Alfred Graves, hereby declare to all lords of this nation. Assemble your forces, we are going to war. Upon hearing the old king's words, and after recovering from the shock, the guard beside him nodded solemnly. Even though the old king had managed to unify the entire continent, most city-states had yet to recover from the previous Great War. As such, the guard's surprise was to be expected. However, after giving it some more thought, the guard soon understood. The shrewd old king was truly above the common rank and file like the guard. Even without external factors slowing down the nation's recovery, it would still take over decades for the continent to return to its former glory prior to the Great War of the past. By then, would the old king still be alive? Even if Lil Tess were to inherit the throne and succeed the old king as the queen of the continent, would her father, who would then be in the heavens, rest easy? No, of course not. So long as the danger capable of wiping out the heroes remained, the old king could not rest, even in death. Therefore, the ensuing battle against the unknown dragon would not only serve to resolve the crisis plaguing Longsong Alley, the copper mine of the nation, it would also serve to hasten the nation's recovery to its former glory. The body of a dragon was like a giant treasure trove, after all. As long as they could defeat the ancient dragon that rivaled Agatha in strength, the rewards they would reap would be astronomical. Moreover, should the humans manage to defeat an ancient dragon by banding together, the dragon race's opinion towards the human race would likely increase. Hopefully, it would cause dragons to think twice before sieging any of the human settlements. Additionally, as a show of respect to the old king, little Tess would likely gain the unanimous support of the lords of the nation to succeed her father as the ruler of the nation. The guard could not help but be extremely excited upon this line of thought. He was happy that he had managed to grasp the old king's thought process, even if it was only slightly. He hurriedly ran out of the door with the intention of informing the ministers and the lords of the king's decision. In less than 3 days, the old king, Alfred Graves' decision to launch a crusade against an unknown dragon in the north had spread throughout the nation. As expected, the country had gone into an uproar. Some agreed with the king's decision. The faction was mostly composed of those who were previously victims of dragons. They no longer wanted to live in fear of dragons, and had they possessed the necessary strength in the first place, they would have already launched their own crusade against dragons. I support His Majesty's decision. So long as the mystery dragon in the north remains, our country will never experience true peace. Everyone, do you still wish to be oppressed by the dragons? Do you want to continue living under the fear of the dragons? Do you want to remain cowardly for the rest of your lives? However, there were also those who opposed the old king. This faction composed of those who had lost family, power, money, or other precious belongings in the previous Great War. They had no desire to lose anything else. If you want to die, then die alone. Don't bring us along. War will bring no benefit to us. Only death and destruction awaits us should His Majesty proceed with this plan. I have already lost my children and husband in the previous war. It's easy for those of you who avoided any losses to agree to this plan. How heartless. Should this crusade take place, the taxes that we'll have to pay would undoubtedly increase. Our harvest is decreasing every year, and we're facing a nationwide food shortage. Where on earth will we obtain the resources for this crusade? Despite the complaints, the lords of the nation had obediently complied with the old king's decision, and they had provided the old king with the resources required for his campaign. After all, the continent had already been unified. Dragons aside, the king's authority was second to none. Should the old king's ire be stoked, it would not be an understatement to say that millions of corpses would ensue. Alfred Graves' anger was not something they took lightly. As such, the preparation of the Grand Crusade against the mighty and mysterious Dragon of the North was in full swing. While all this was happening, Max was slumbering peacefully in his cave. He was completely oblivious to the events taking place in the human world. The next day, by the time Max had woken up, the sun was already hanging high above his head. After stretching his muscles and bones, Max felt that the muscles and veins in his body had once again strengthened. As expected, reincarnating into a dragon comes with many perks. All it takes to grow stronger is a simple sleep. System, show me my current stats. Ding. Loading stats interface. True name, Max Agatha Hill Alexander. Race, Red Dragon, Lawful Evil. Current rank, Hatchling. Age, 1. Maximum lifespan, 12,000, Ancient Dragon. Attack, 31, Normal Red Dragon Hatchling 15. Spell Strength, 505, Normal Red Dragon Hatchling 25. Defense, 21, Normal Red Dragon Hatchling 10. Speed, 30, Normal Red Dragon Hatchling 13. Spells, Lightning Arrow Rain, Thunderstorm, Lightning Paralysis, Thunderclap, Light Affinity, Lightning Immunity, Thunderous Divine Retribution, 10 million volts of thunder. Abilities, Bite, Claw Strike, Stomp, Tail Swipe. Breath, Lightning, Strong Acid. Remarks, should any other dragon hatchling possess the same stats as you, this world would undoubtedly be ruled by the dragons. As expected, I've become stronger. Although his improvement was not as great as devouring the black dragon or Tahir, it was still decent. Max was not greedy. He was very satisfied with his speed of growth. However, Max's attention was quickly pulled away from the interface. A sad series of wails had grabbed his attention. Max turned around and spotted his sister, Mia. She seemed to be having a nightmare. Tears rolled down the corner of her eyes, and she seemed to be choking on her tears. It was truly a pitiful sight. Max sighed helplessly. It seemed that the departure of their mother, Agatha, had dealt a great blow to Mia. Max was not as cold and heartless as Agatha. He was an existence who had transmigrated, after all. Although his personality had begun to subtly change towards that of a dragon, as his only remaining family member, Max cherished her greatly. He needed to pull Mia out of her depression. The old king put down the letter and said slowly, I, Alfred Graves, hereby declare to all lords of this nation. Assemble your forces, we are going to war. Upon hearing the old king's words, and after recovering from the shock, the guard beside him nodded solemnly. Even though the old king had managed to unify the entire continent, most city-states had yet to recover from the previous Great War. As such, the guard's surprise was to be expected. However, after giving it some more thought, the guard soon understood. The shrewd old king was truly above the common rank and file like the guard. Even without external factors slowing down the nation's recovery, it would still take over decades for the continent to return to its former glory prior to the Great War of the past. By then, would the old king still be alive? Even if Lil Tess were to inherit the throne and succeed the old king as the queen of the continent, would her father, who would then be in the heavens, rest easy? No, of course not. So long as the danger capable of wiping out the heroes remained, the old king could not rest, even in death. Therefore the ensuing battle against the unknown dragon would not only serve to resolve the crisis plaguing Longsong Alley, the copper mine of the nation, it would also serve to hasten the nation's recovery to its former glory. The body of a dragon was like a giant treasure trove, after all. As long as they could defeat the ancient dragon that rivaled Agatha in strength, the rewards they would reap would be astronomical. Moreover, should the humans manage to defeat an ancient dragon by banding together, the dragon race's opinion towards the human race would likely increase. Hopefully, it would cause dragons to think twice before sieging any of the human settlements. Additionally, as a show of respect to the old king, little Tess would likely gain the unanimous support of the lords of the nation to succeed her father as the ruler of the nation. The guard could not help but be extremely excited upon this line of thought. He was happy that he had managed to grasp the old king's thought process, even if it was only slightly. He hurriedly ran out of the door with the intention of informing the ministers and the lords of the king's decision. In less than 3 days, the old king, Alfred Graves' decision to launch a crusade against an unknown dragon in the north had spread throughout the nation. As expected, the country had gone into an uproar. Some agreed with the king's decision. The faction was mostly composed of those who were previously victims of dragons. They no longer wanted to live in fear of dragons, and had they possessed the necessary strength in the first place, they would have already launched their own crusade against dragons. I support His Majesty's decision. So long as the mystery dragon in the north remains, our country will never experience true peace. Everyone, do you still wish to be oppressed by the dragons? Do you want to continue living under the fear of the dragons? Do you want to remain cowardly for the rest of your lives? However, there were also those who opposed the old king. This faction composed of those who had lost family, power, money, or other precious belongings in the previous Great War. They had no desire to lose anything else. If you want to die, then die alone. Don't bring us along. War will bring no benefit to us. Only death and destruction awaits us should His Majesty proceed with this plan. I have already lost my children and husband in the previous war. It's easy for those of you who avoided any losses to agree to this plan. How heartless. Should this crusade take place, the taxes that we'll have to pay would undoubtedly increase. Our harvest is decreasing every year, and we're facing a nationwide food shortage. Where on earth will we obtain the resources for this crusade? Despite the complaints, the lords of the nation had obediently complied with the old king's decision, and they had provided the old king with the resources required for his campaign. After all, the continent had already been unified. Dragons aside, the king's authority was second to none. Should the old king's ire be stoked, it would not be an understatement to say that millions of corpses would ensue. Alfred Graves' anger was not something they took lightly. As such, the preparation of the Grand Crusade against the mighty and mysterious dragon of the north was in full swing. While all this was happening, Max was slumbering peacefully in his cave. He was completely oblivious to the events taking place in the human world. The next day, by the time Max had woken up, the sun was already hanging high above his head. After stretching his muscles and bones, Max felt that the muscles and veins in his body had once again strengthened. As expected, reincarnating into a dragon comes with many perks. All it takes to grow stronger is a simple sleep. System, show me my current stats. Ding. Loading stats interface. True name, Max Agatha Hill Alexander. Race, Red Dragon, Lawful Evil. Current rank, Hatchling. Age, 1. Maximum lifespan, 12,000, Ancient Dragon. Attack, 31, Normal Red Dragon Hatchling 15. Spell Strength, 505, Normal Red Dragon Hatchling 25. Defense, 21, Normal Red Dragon Hatchling 10. Speed, 30, Normal Red Dragon Hatchling 13. Spells, Lightning Arrow Rain, Thunderstorm, Lightning Paralysis, Thunderclap, Light Affinity, Lightning Immunity, Thunderous Divine Retribution, 10 million volts of thunder. Abilities: Bite, Claw Strike, Stomp, Tail Swipe. Breath: Lightning, Strong Acid. Remarks: should any other dragon hatchling possess the same stats as you, this world would undoubtedly be ruled by the dragons. As expected, I've become stronger. Although his improvement was not as great as devouring the black dragon or Tahir, it was still decent. Max was not greedy. He was very satisfied with his speed of growth. However, Max's attention was quickly pulled away from the interface. A sad series of wails had grabbed his attention. Max turned around and spotted his sister, Mia. She seemed to be having a nightmare. Tears rolled down the corner of her eyes, and she seemed to be choking on her tears. It was truly a pitiful sight. Max sighed helplessly. It seemed that the departure of their mother, Agatha, had dealt a great blow to Mia. Max was not as cold and heartless as Agatha. He was an existence who had transmigrated, after all. Although his personality had begun to subtly change towards that of a dragon, as his only remaining family member, Max cherished her greatly. He needed to pull Mia out of her depression.